We're going to call this workshop to order. It is 1 p.m. It is Tuesday, August the 11th. It is the superintendent's workshop. And at this time, I will turn this over for Dr. Moore for a series of presentations. We have quite a few items to go through, and we are here until 4.
All right. Thank you.
That's correct, right?
That
4?
is correct. We have
Okay.
up until 4. Let's say
4.
it like that. Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. We do have 4 presentations. I have discussed with some of you recommending making one modification to the agenda, which is the annual feedback as it relates to superintendent's performance, because I have not had the opportunity to engage in that conversation with all of you due to the opening of schools and the significant amount of time we've been problem solving around those particular issues. My recommendation is we push that to the next workshop, and then our focus will be on the remaining agenda items, which begins with the presentation of Mr. Meyer, renewal of contracts, followed by Mr. Meyer, the Rick Meyer Show, presentation of professional learning catalog, which we're excited to present, and then we will do a presentation on school reopening and then receive feedback and recommendations from the school board. So with that, Madam Chair, I will turn it over to Mr. Meyer for his first 2 presentations.
Thank you. Green light comes on. Thank you, Dr. Moore. Through the chair, I have 2 contract renewals, the first of which is the dual enrollment agreement with Indian River State College for the 2020-21 school year. Florida statutes requires that each school district have a dual enrollment articulation agreement with the college that's designated within that district's service area. A great partnership with Indian River State College, and so we're continuing that. Many of parts of this contract will be familiar to board members. One part that is unique to this year is that in response to COVID-19 and the inability to take certain tests like PERT that weren't offered, we did not want that to be a hindrance to our students to begin their dual enrollment journey. So in partnership with IRSC, we have designated additional courses or additional tests which would enable students to begin their dual enrollment pathway. So there's a pretty big section in there that may be new to your eyes as far as using FSA or EOCs. This is, of course, something that was recommended by the Department of Education for districts and state colleges to utilize so that students aren't held back by that. So very excited to open up the door for more of our students to begin their journey. And that is the item, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any comments or discussion on the item?
No, ma'am.
Yeah, I haven't been able to type in comment
Okay.
yet. I'd just like to say thank you very much for not only prepping me about this because I had some questions, but also opening it up to more students. And I think with the support that's going to be available, I think that's exciting for kids. So I'm not sure if parents know about how wonderful dual enrollment can be, but I'm excited that more parents will find out. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Sheff?
Yeah, just a quick thing. Mr. Meyer, I know we talked about this, but so that everybody understands, can you just talk a little bit about the PERT and the PERT requirement and how that is now working?
Right, so the PERT has not been offered. I don't know when it's going to be offered again, but what we will see if you are able to look on the pages there, begins on page 4 of this agreement. There's just a wide variety of options that students are able to utilize to begin their pathway. So when the PERT becomes available, of course, we'll readdress its use as far as a placement score, but hopefully across the state, we hope maybe we can be an area that really showcases how well this can work. I would like, just from someone that's worked in different areas, would like to see this methodology be in place at permanently across the state, because I don't see why you wouldn't want more pathways. We always talk about assessment. There's no need to take one assessment when you have one that should count. And so making students go take the PERT just to take the PERT, I think, is unnecessary. So if we find that PSAT or FSA scores of a level 5 expedites the process of students, hopefully that's something that the Department of Education supports and districts can ensure continues. And of course, when the PERT comes back and they can do that, why not? But you just don't see that needs to be the only pathway in order to get students moving along their journey.
Okay. All right. Kristen, any other comments that I'm not seeing? All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer, and then.
One more, I have one more, contract, Dr. Moore. This is so the second item there is the early learning contract with our extended day program. Our extended day program, very excited about, a lot of work that's gone into that, which I'll address at a later part of the presentation in preparation for this school year. But we do partner with the Early Learning Coalition in order to provide low-income families a subsidized rate for that before and after school care. So this is the contract that we would need to, the extended day program will need to enter into with the Early Learning Coalition to provide that support. So something we've done for a number of years. You'll see that it is quite lengthy, 276 pages to ensure that we get that in, but appreciate the work of staff to get that submitted so that we can provide families with that support.
Okay. Any comments or questions from board members? No? No, thank you. It's a great program. I know that this is very used with, it's for working parents, actually, so it's a great opportunity to help our community, so thank you.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to highlight some work that's been done over the past few weeks in a little bit, and very, very excited about where our extended day program is going. So,
Okay.
Dr. Moore, you want me to continue with
Yes, sir,
the-
please.
All right, through the chair. And so my second item, or presentation rather, aside from the contract renewals, is the request for approval of our professional learning catalog for the 2020-21 school year pursuant to Section 1011, 22, 101298, and 101162. We're required to develop and maintain an in-service catalog which shows, what we're offering to our staff members and meets specific needs. When looking across the state, what you will often find is just the back half of this, and really that's sort of the minimum requirements as far as the courses, the objectives, right, the standards they cover. But we've gone a step further. I'm really proud of Dr. Lord and the newly reorganized Department of Educator Quality, that what we seek to do with this professional learning catalog for the school district of Indian River County is to ensure that this becomes the one-stop shop for information as far as what a staff member, what a teacher would need to know in order to get the different trainings that they need. So we're adding into this all of the great things we're doing around instructional coaching, the principal development pools, reading endorsement, gifted endorsement, how you renew your certificate. All this great stuff is going to move into here. Along with continuous improvement, we are proud of the product we have, but if we get feedback and we have opportunity to improve upon this, we certainly will do so. I look at this as being a really exciting product that we can be proud of as a district. So that is the item, Madam Chair.
Okay. Comments or questions? Okay, Mr. Meyer, we had talked about the extensive volume of information that's in here, and it's all great information. And my question to you was, how do we get that out to our teachers so that they not only read the manual, but what are we doing to help reinforce all this information? And would you like to?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk
And,
about
I think that some of the support and the answer to this credit goes to other offices. The cabinet members supervised Dr. Moore, Ms. Dampier. We really got a good process designed for the collaborator to improve communication to all staff members across the district. There are also things that we have done in partnership with Mr. Bass's office as far as Frontline, which is the new product that we're utilizing to monitor and keep track of the actual points and whether or not they've been completed. So I think if you look across the district, there are a recognition that the communication, we can improve upon that. So we're addressing it from multiple facets to get that information out to teachers so that they understand the complexity of what's going on. And of course, that work comes with some alignment, right? As we find that, one piece we've added to, we need to add it to other pieces and ensure that that's being communicated in each and every instance consistently. So it's been a good process thus far. Very proud of the work.
Great. Mrs. Rosario?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a question that I didn't ask before, Mr. Meyer, and I apologize for that, but where do our CWA workers fall in terms of professional learning opportunities for them?
I may need to phone a friend here, Mr. Bass, but I would, I do know that in Frontline is where we're keeping track of a lot of that. And so, our office does develop, C&I does develop trainings that are specifically designed for CWA employees, I would say that. But comprehensively, I'll let Mr. Bass add in. I know that there are other professional developments that, his staff are overseeing to ensure that they are getting, to make sure they're experts in their field. Certainly, the comprehensive nature of staff development and ensuring that it's all being taken care of. I have asked Dr. Lord to sort of take the lead on that too, and she's collaborating with folks in HCO and in Ms. Dampier's office to ensure that the right trainings are, entered into Frontline, and that there's an opportunity for staff to complete those. So she is, as the Director of Educator Quality, our staff members that are CWA, they're part of the team with us. I mean, we're not going to leave them out. And so some of the courses that, are developed by C&I and that are within this particular professional learning catalog for teachers would be open to them, but there are many other trainings that Mr. Bass and others are providing to them as well. So, Mr. Bass, did I miss anything on that?
Through the chair, no, Mr. Meyer, you're pretty spot on there. Ms. Rosario, we have a couple of different items that we use for training for our non-instructional staff. The Safe Schools library of trainings, which we can gear that down to be specific to the area that they are in. We would utilize that. We have utilized that. That's one of the things we utilized this past spring. Also, which COVID is on our mind, and we'll be talking about a lot more. We've got specific trainings for non-instructional staff that we have put together that will be tracked through Frontline and with the COVID training, specializing in those different areas.
Thank you for that. I apologize. I didn't mean to put anybody on the spot with that question. I was thinking about it as I went through because this is quite extensive of opportunities that we have for our instructional staff. And I'm very proud of the work that you all did in putting this together. I know that much of it was already in place, but to actually, organize it in a different way and provide more opportunities. Am I echoing?
No, you're fine.
Oh, okay. But obviously I had the question with regard to CWA workers, so I appreciate that. I do have another question that I also did not think about earlier. When I was not employed at the district, I was on disability, I still had my certificate. When it came to that time when I personally needed to renew, I didn't have another opportunity to submit my required coursework or apply through the state, because through the state, they actually ask you on the application form to apply through a district. Our district at the time was gracious enough, I called them up, the professional development department. I called them up, I explained my situation. I explained that I was an employee before going on disability. And while I was home, I explained the whole situation. Anyway, they were gracious enough to allow me to take the professional development courses that through the district. And when I applied for certification, it was also through the district. It was a blessing. And I know that there are a lot of other people who are just not currently working and find that renewing their certification, there is an option for local school districts to give them the courtesy and say, sure, you can apply through our district as it was granted to me. Is there something that is in place for others in my situation, who were in my situation? Is this something that, maybe this is a question for Dr. Moore, is there an objection to allow local teachers who are certified but who are just not working the courtesy to renew their certification keep their certification updated through our district. These are possible people who may actually reapply to work, in the future for our district. So assisting them in the renewal process and ensuring that certifications are updated really might benefit us in the end. So what are your thoughts on that?
Through the
Anyone, I
chair,
guess.
I give a nod back here too. I was just thinking the same lines that you got to, looking at Ms. Hofer. Personally, I think we need to do everything to support the educators in our area and recruit them to be part of our team. I think that that's, the environment that we are wanting to build here under Dr. Moore's leadership is to, let the entire community know that we want them on our team and this is the team to be on. So if we have retired educators or educators that are wanting to renew their certificate, come in, we're going to get you squared away, and we may just have a job for you. So let's
awesome.
build a stronger team together and make sure that we're working. I have heard in other districts, there's been difficulty with that. But to be honest, I don't think that it's a burden to many districts. The number of individuals that would be doing this would be small. So why not take care of them and try to get, keep them abreast of job opportunities and, like you said, maybe even 5 people a year, right? If we were worried about, 10,000, people in Indian River doing this, it may be a burden to the district. But for the few that we would probably be assisting a year, I don't think that that's a burden to our office. And we can certainly make sure that we are, making those strides to keep them part of our family.
Okay.
That is awesome. I cannot tell you how happy that makes me. And I'm sure if there's anyone out there who's listening right now in the local area, that's just one little tiny area that our district extends the courtesy of professional learning to local educators. So thank you so much for that response.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, just a quick question. The professional learning handbook, I noticed there are things in it. We also offer a variety of professional development. And those are somewhat separate. Like I know we'll be offering more around cultural competence and implicit bias, which is not reflected in this handbook. So can you just distinguish where people will find those courses? These, as I understand it, are for continuing certification and a variety of other things they need, but it's not the same as the professional development.
Right, and through the chair, that's a great question. As we develop those, they get added into this. And so as those are on the horizon, those will be in front line, and you will see those appear in subsequent versions of this professional learning catalog.
And hold on. Sorry, I had muted myself again. This, though, is in effect for the entire year. I know that we'll be doing a lot of work on that through the 2020-2021 year. Will this handbook be updated throughout the year, or does it only come to us once a year?
This version right here is only the one time a year, but the continued development of professional development that goes into frontline is ongoing.
All right. Mrs. Barrenborg?
Yes, thank you. Little off topic, but still on topic. We talked yesterday about some concerns that some teachers have, and I have, and I'm sure the public has, about the what-if scenarios of COVID and if we have to shut down again. And if that's the case, last time we did that, teachers went to online with very little training. And so I know that you guys have kind of been doing some what-if scenarios and some preparation for what if we have to go back online. So could you address maybe, I'm not sure if it's you or Dr. Moore, about professional development that we're giving our teachers for teaching online if they have to?
Sure. Are we saving that for?
I mean, we do have a presentation
Okay, good.
this evening, and I think today and this evening, we're going to rewatch it. And I think we're covering that. We are, just to kind of set it up or tease that, very proud of that set of work. And my desire to get this right and be transparent, open, and honest, and looking at research and looking at what other districts are doing. I think we're the only one that is preparing for the what if and the when, and have criteria created, have development that will be taking place with our teachers, or for our teachers is probably the better way of saying it, to ensure when there is a separation from the brick and mortar, a separation being because of a quarantine or because of a closure, there will be no break in instruction. and having that plan ready to go. So we ensure that we continue with a fluid instructional model from day one through the end of the school year is that work that needs to take place on the front end. So we're very excited of that work that we've been doing and quite honestly, leading that work that we're going to highlight later on in today's presentation.
I look forward to seeing that. Thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Justice?
Thank you very much. This is a question for Dr. Moore. Dr. Moore, it's interesting, Dr. Schiff brought up some thoughts about professional development regarding implicit bias training or cultural competency training, and that kind of, piques my interest a little bit. Last year, we had a situation where a community group brought in the Southern Poverty Law Center to come in and facilitate a social justice training. And many people in our community, conservatives in our community, were very concerned about Southern Poverty Law Center being the facilitator of that training. I think this community in general is very concerned about some of the social justice work and training that will go on because it is done in many different ways. And so if we're approving this right now, this catalog, but again, when we talk about professional development for teachers and if there's any supporting and then working with our students, can you talk a little bit about the board's involvement and the board's ability to make sure that their constituents' concerns are taken into account when we are providing professional development for the people that will be spending time with their children in classrooms?
Through the chair, let me just kind of highlight this particular document. I think Mr. Meyer kind of should sell it. It is significantly enhanced in terms of previous school years, even in comparison to other districts, even the one that I come from. So it is a above and beyond production that we are providing to you today. As I have mentioned a number of times, professional development is the heartbeat of the district. Matter of fact, I was just yelling that in Mr. Meyer's space to his entire team prior to coming down here. And I don't believe in outsourcing development. I think we have done probably some of the best work in the state in the creation of a strategic plan and the alignment of that plan to school improvement initiatives that we're still in process of training and embedding and creating and ensuring that there is a high level of alignment in terms of that development. A lot of times districts fall into that particular concern because someone comes in, and I'm not 100% familiar to that was prior to my arrival. Well, that sounds good. Someone came and give this presentation. Let's do it for our schools, where we've done the forward thinking to say, what are we doing in January? What are we doing in February? What kind of development is taking place? I think the assurance that you're asking for comes when the school improvement plans come to you for approval, and in each of those documents, school sites are pulling from the development provided from Mr. Meyer's office. Any outside development would be the forward thinking would have taken place then. So it becomes, here's my plan to ensure academic success for all children in my school that they began working on, 3 weeks ago in Reignite, and we'll begin that momentum and that creation over the course of the next 4 or 5 weeks before it comes to you for my team, final review, and then for you to approve. So it is a thought-out, created map on the process we're going to take, and most of that process is how we're going to develop and grow educators based on the level of implementation and the impact that we're having on instruction.
So I have a follow-up question.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. Something that's come up that's been an issue in classrooms is supplemental material that's given to students that hasn't been approved by this school board. We use our textbooks, and our textbooks are approved by this school board, but other types of curriculum that are passed out to students, and specifically in regards to cultural competency training or different issues like that. I'm curious when the school board is going to be able to vet those documents to see them, if they're going to be given as some type of curriculum and it's outside of our textbooks.
So I'll set this up, Mr. Meyer, and I know he's going to be jumping at the bit to jump in. I think that has been absolutely outstanding work that we've done, vetting those supplementary or secondary curriculums, ensuring that everything is aligned to the standards, whether it be regardless of the option in which you choose. That has been reinforced, that has been vetted, and the expectation is before curriculum goes in front of children, we ensure that it is appropriate and aligned to the standards. So that process is in place. I think the reality is when school starts, we live, eat, breathe, and drink in schools, looking at what's taking place in schools. There should be absolutely no excuse to find content in front of children that isn't aligned to the standards by me or anybody else, because principals are in schools. The development that Mr. Meyer and his team offered over the summer really solely focused in on standards-aligned content, looking at the principal competencies and ensuring we had a good understanding of what we're putting in front of our students, what we're asking students do will lead to the success that we expect of them to have. I'm sure he has more to add.
No, I think that hits on it absolutely, Dr. Moore. A couple other steps that we've taken, Ms. Justice, and I don't remember having this conversation at one of these workshops a couple months ago, and I share the concerns because it is all about instructional alignment, and we want to make sure that our students are getting what they deserve. So an additional step that we've put in is I'm now the approver for the district's discretionary instructional materials budget. I mean, they of course have that, but before anything is purchased out of that, I've got to review and approve that. That's an added feature for this year. There was a process for having that supplemental material reviewed and approved, but now there's an additional component there about the purchasing to make sure that it doesn't sneak in the back door. Of course, as we all know, there are other ways for this material to be acquired, and that's where Dr. Moore is hitting on it. It is our ability to be in the classrooms and making sure we're monitoring what's really, really going on. And so making sure that what we have approved, what we've rolled out in the curriculum maps, the pacing guides, that is what's being utilized in the classroom and not something else. And quite honestly, if we're not in there observing, then we wouldn't know. So we have to get into the classrooms and watch that occur.
Wonderful, thank you. It's a great answer, and I think parents will really appreciate that attention to detail, so thank you.
So Dr. Moore, Mrs. Justice brought up a good point on some of this. If a parent, if there is material that's being presented in the classroom that appears to be more opinionated versus factual, where would the parent, what would some of the steps the parent would need to take to voice their concern?
Through the chair, the first step is always the principal. The principal is the leader of those buildings, ones who has been charged with upholding expectation and supporting that expectation. And from a systems perspective, we really want to empower our principals to solve problems as close to children as possible. So that initial response is always going to be the principal and looking at that content. I think from a district perspective, we continue to push out the information, how important it is to have quality standards line instruction in classroom and then support those standards through very meaningful differentiated instruction to pull students up to the standards and continue to brand that particular message.
Okay, thank you.
And then one other item I just wanted to add, when we spoke about the CWA, Mr. Murray did speak to the board during a public meeting and inquire about the opportunity for a new orientation for CWA employees. We're excited to be offering that the 20th, which is actually this week. I'll have the opportunity to present and welcome those employees to the district. And so we were able to put that together, which will kind of kick off and aligns to the professional development that was initially being asked.
Okay, that's next week.
Yeah, is it next week? They're blending together, Madam Chair. I got the day right.
Yes.
And then our next item is the opening of schools presentation. Mr. Meyer's presentations are done. I thought the best way to set up this item is to really go above and beyond the manual that is in front of us now to review, because it doesn't by any means capture the breadth and depth of the work that this team has done, our principals have done, our teachers have done. I will kick off the presentation by saying that I am very proud of the system, the district, the leadership that has been provided not by me, but those who stand at this table with me, as well as our principals and our teacher leaders, our district staff, really to roll up the sleeves and lead with concern. We were a district that understood that there is a great deal of uncertainty, there is a great deal of concern regarding the reopening of schools. And we led with that conversation and that heart at mind, really to walk through those concerns, to create a plan that is flexible enough to meet the needs of all families and all children and all faculty and staff. So the plan that we are in the midst of implementing, which we had our teachers return last week, and it was great to have almost a sense of normalcy to return to schools, visit with teachers, see professional development taking place, see principals begin to connect the work that they did all summer long in the creation of their plans to begin putting them to work. We are nowhere near done. There is still a great deal of work yet to be done, but I am proud of where we currently are and how connected we are through the problem-solving process, not only in the creation of this plan, but also where we are in terms of implementation. So as I said before in setting this up, I am vigilant in looking and speaking with other superintendents regarding where they are, as well as surfing and reviewing their procedures and documentation, and being steadfast in the research and looking at what medical experts and professionals are saying regarding this process. And I think that's just the expectation this board has of me, really to look through and have a clear, deep understanding as to what we're going to do. One of the things I did last week is, for the last 2 weeks actually, is to ask our family, ask our employees where we are with implementation, where, as your superintendent, do I need to put more attention, modify shift practice in order to ensure that we get this right? Really just listening and learning. And we were able to learn, making sure that mask is a priority in our schools, is able to push some additional information to empower principals to ensure that we are masked up in the school district of Indian River County when social distancing is not possible, in order to ensure the downward trend that we're experiencing as a community continues to fall down that trajectory in which it currently is taking. So we're excited to see that, and we're excited to see the willingness of our employees to implement the plans. We also pushed out additional information that we'll be sharing today regarding what to do when there is a possible exposure, what to do when you have the symptoms, the process that you would follow. So what we will do today is begin with a presentation from each of the cabinet members, where they are, what they have been able to accomplish. As they finish those presentations, I will key in on some shifts in the actual document and then turn it back to conversation or follow up that myself or the team would be happy to respond to you. So I think we'll begin with our deputy superintendent and work through each cabinet members regarding the work that they've done to support our schools, our principals, teachers, and community as we prepare to open schools for the 2021 school year.
Madam Chair, Board, good afternoon. I'm going to try my best to not get too far off in the weeds with this, because I definitely can, because there's lots of moving parts. I would like to start with thinking back, if you were trying to envision how human capital and operations work together. Unfortunately, COVID is a perfect opportunity to display that, because it is definitely the infusing of both of those departments. From the human capital side, we had to take 2 federal guidelines into effect before we started moving forward with this. The first being the Families First Corona Relief Act, which is what is going to allow staff members to have accommodations if they are deemed medically critical. HR staff has been working through those, and those individuals have been submitting documentation needed for that. We created our own forms and guidance to have those individuals submit that, and then we go through those based on federal guidelines to either approve or deny those. To date, we have 115 employees who have accommodations. That number will vary. It will depend upon whether someone in someone's family gets sick and they have to care for them and they're medically fragile. It will depend upon if there's diagnosis moving forward. So it could go up or down, but right now we're at 115. The second federal guidance that we had to work with is the Corona Act FMLA. That came out about, I'm looking at Suzanne, about 3 weeks or so after the coronavirus really started hitting. And that is where we track the positive test individuals who are employees. And HR staff will go through and process those individuals. They will track them, and they will make payroll assurances that they will be entitled and receive the payroll and benefits that they should be receiving through that FMLA. Then we move into staff reporting. This one is quite convoluted and can get pretty complicated. But when we talk about the staff reporting, we are identifying all individuals who are out ill and keeping track of them. So we need to make sure to know that if they are feeling ill and take precautionary measures to stay at home, they have within 48 hours to go get tested. And if they go get tested, come back with a negative test, those days will be covered through the Corona federal funds. We also were working with those who are quarantined or ordered to be quarantined, and then we direct them to the FMLA leave. The individuals who are negative, we also keep track of them so we can bring them back, and we know what date all of these people are to return to work. And then lastly, and most importantly, we are communicating with the Department of Health because we need to get information from them for contact tracing, and also they need to get it from us and look at trends within not only what is happening with our staff, but eventually what will be happening with our students. And I just want to point this out because this plays a pretty big role into some other steps that we've taken upon ourselves, especially the next section I'm going to get into. Department of Health right now is not getting all of the testing information as rapidly as sometimes we may get it. If someone goes to a care agency or even goes and does a test, I think you can even buy them now at CVS at times, they're getting the results quicker than Department of Health is getting them. So this is not just, at first when this started, we thought this was going to be a one-way avenue of information, of us going straight to Department of Health and saying, okay, this person is positive. We now are transferring information back and forth. So there's an open line of communication there between both agencies. The next thing that we developed in all of Cabinet, and I think we hammered this out last Friday afternoon pretty late as a result of identifying one of our own shortcomings of not having everything spelled out as clearly and cleanly as we should, but it's the development of the COVID systems protocol, and it depicts the employees' responsibilities if they are ill or if they're feeling ill. It also depicts the principal supervisor's responsibilities for their staff, that what they would do if their staff is sick. Also, we went ahead and outlined parents' responsibilities. And then lastly, the principal's responsibilities for students who test positive. We found that just by our discussions and problem-solving sessions with the principals, we were not communicating effectively. So we went ahead and spelled this out, and it is out there for staff to follow. As a result of this, we determined that we knew that we were going to have to get to this point, and we took the lead from Friday, and we went ahead and worked through it over the weekend. The COVID district response team. So this is going to be pretty critical work here, because once we start school and we get into school, if we have a student or a staff member who comes up and tests positive, then staff at the school, the administrative staff, the designated staff, they will ensure that information for us to contact trace within our own agency is available in focus. Myself, Ms. Hofer, and Mr. Seymour will then work with those school staff to identify, based on the protocols that Dr. Moore had mentioned earlier, who needs to quarantine, and if possibly we get to a point where we need to either shut down a class, a grade level, a school, a sports team, a club or organization, depending upon that information. It's going to be critical work, and you know, one thing, and I'm going to steal one of your lines from today with principals, was we don't want to have to navigate through this when this happens. We want to be able to say, enact the plan, put the plan in progress. So that's what we've got a good handle on that now as to where we're going to go with it. With everything with COVID, it is going to evolve and it's going to be flexible. And we know that there will be changes as we work through this, but we will be ready to go ahead and act that plan. Another key component is our communication with Victoria Burney, who oversees our health assistants and nurses within the district, and their communicable disease tracking log, which we will be sharing with Department of Health daily from the schools, tracking the students and also the adults, so that Department of Health can look at trends as what we're seeing happening in our schools. Are we seeing, fevers that are non-COVID related possibly? Are we seeing, pink eyes, one thing that they always track? But that is going to give us another piece of information to try to keep all our students and staff safe. The other documents that have been created through this is we have got handbooks, particularly for athletics. And I point this one out, and I'm not hitting on everything, I'm just giving you the highlights. But I point this one out because we have had athletic conditioning going on since, I believe, June 20th. And I want to brag on Mr. Seymour and also the athletic directors at both high schools. They have done a very good job as to keeping things working in a way that student athletes have been able to participate this summer. We have had some situations where we've had to shut down practice or conditioning due to COVID, and they have handled it. It has been done correctly. Another thing I didn't hit on was everything that Dr. Suit and her team is doing and everything that we're having to do with everybody else, we still have to keep confidentiality in place. So that just adds another layer of difficulty to this task that we're up against. Another thing that we have created that is, the handbook for athletics is really well written out, and Mr. Seymour did a great job putting that together. Dr. Moore has the reopening plan, so we created a reopening manual and checklist for principals, so they can work through the plan that he's going to bring forward to you again this evening, and they can go through step by step. And then we've also created a checklist, which starting Thursday, and I don't know who else was going to be going with me, and I'll even extend the invitation to you five if you would like to join me in going to schools and doing a COVID checklist walkthrough to make sure everything is in place. So that offer is out there if y'all would like to come along. So that is the human capital piece of it. Then that blends straight over into the operations part. So if we're going to have all of these things in place for human capital, we've got to have our operations on point and working also. The physical plant, Mr. Michael and his staff has made several modifications within our buildings that are going to help keep our students and staff safe. We've put plexiglass shields at all the front offices. We have a feeling that there are going to be some other areas once we get kids in that we see that we need to add those, and we're prepared to do that. The cleaning protocol and training videos that Ann Rybin and her staff have made for the custodians. We did a big training right before we got out for spring, and we've expanded upon that so that they are aware more of.
I'm going to allow Mr. Bass to finish his presentation before we take any questions. So thank you, Kristen. I see the little sign up there, but I want you to finish your
Okay.
thoughts before we go into, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. One thing, though, or two other items I want to point out to you about facilities. Water. So we have turned off the water fountains at all schools and all facilities because of it being a high-touch area. One thing that two things we've done. We've ordered pallets of water for each school. That is, I believe, already here, or if not, will be here before the first day of school for sure. The other thing is we're looking to get retrofits for the touchless water bottle refilling stations. I know I've seen it in about 5 schools, but we need more of those. So Mr. Michael and his staff are working toward getting those in. Unfortunately, I believe they're on back order, but we will get them just as quick as we can, and we'll provide the water bottles until then. And then the last thing, and this is something that's come up a lot, is the air quality in the schools. Now, there are all types of equipment out there that you can use to improve the air quality in buildings, okay? But when you talk about schools, to really concentrate and improve the air quality in a structure that large, it is difficult to do because you've got to look at the capacity size and the dwelling time. And because it is such an in and out with schools, and because of the sheer size, a lot of the things that people are out there saying, well, we need to put air purifiers in classrooms. An air purifier will work fine if it were in a small 10 by 10 room. But when you're talking about giant schools, the access area and flow areas, it's really no way to do that. The other thing that's come out is the HEPA filters. To retrofit our HVAC systems for the HEPA filters is just not, it isn't feasible. But one thing that we have done is we've increased the MERV rating filters that we are using. That's the mechanical efficiency rating. And the MERV rating filters that we were using were, I believe, a 9, but we've gone up to a 13. And why that's important is the diameter of the micron of the coronavirus, I believe, is 0.125. The MERV 13 filter will block things from 3 to 1. So it is not 100%, but it is as close to that category as we can get to block it out. So I just wanted to point those things out. Transportation, we have route drivers right now troubleshooting their routes as far as capacity on the buses and working to see what that student roster will look like. I tasked Ms. Idolette and her team, and they came back in about 3 hours with this. I said, we need to have a hand sanitizing station on your bus. And so they manufactured something and said, will this work? And it's basically a cup holder, and you slide the hand sanitizer pump in right when the kids get on the bus. So it's right there for them when they get on the bus, and they go sit down and wipe their hands down. And then lastly, seating charts. They already do seating charts, but they're going to enhance those seating charts, again, because if we get to the response team and we have to identify a student that has been on the bus that's tested positive, we've got to go back and track and see who was on that bus and where they were sitting. Food service, we've already talked about, and it's in our plan for the grab-and-go meals. Seating options, the cafeteria managers, along with the principals, are working to provide seating options that is going to give that social distancing that's needed. Hand sanitation stations have been added in front of all food lines, serving lines. And then our touchless point of service, which we hit on, I believe, at the last meeting with the swipe cards. Safety, last item in the operation, safety. You know, we have the state mandated drills that we have to do. We actually met with Damian Kelly, I guess about 3 weeks ago, and that was one of the questions that we asked him was, how are we going to be able to do these active shooter drills, fire drills, and socially distance? Because, you know, the thought is you go to a hard corner and you all bunch up and there's no way to socially distance there. So Damian Kelly said, and it's also come out with DOE guidance, that we do modifications in those drills, maybe showing one student, showing where to go. So when Mr. Teskey's been out on military duty, and he'll be back next week, he has already been working on getting the plan in place for giving those modified training drills. So if you take the operations and you take the human capital, and now we're going to implement it, how things are going to work. One of the things that we've been doing for the past month is we have had bi-weekly sessions, support calls with principal and all the district staff's departments. And this has been critical to what we feel has gotten us to the point that we're at now, because it's given us opportunity to provide guidance and direction, brainstorm, problem solve, and troubleshoot. The knowledge and the feedback that our principals are providing us and tasking us with how to solve these problems is invaluable. The first week of having teachers back on campus and the things that have come to us since that first week as, hey, have you thought about this? What about this? I mean, this is the work that we have to do to work together to be able to open schools, which leads me to the next thing that we've done is our labor relations. You know, I had somebody say to me the other day, said, well, you're negotiating the MOUs for COVID. I said, no, it's not negotiations. It is us working together. And Jennifer and Mike, I'm sure y'all are watching or listening. I can't praise both units enough for the work that they have done with us collaboratively in order to get us to the place where we're at now. I know Dr. Moore's alluded to it. I have several friends throughout the state, and they have called me and says, how in the world are y'all doing this? How do you have things already this far in advance? And it's the collaborative work that we're doing with both unions. You know, we've worked through the MOUs. We've problem solved. In fact, Mr. Meyer and I are going to jump on a call today at 4:30 and try to work on some other stuff. So it's constant. It's not going to be cut and dry, okay, negotiations or whatever are over. I mean, we've got to keep working together in order to be able to educate our students safely and bring our staff back safely. Training, and I know that we just hit on that a little bit, but some of the trainings that we have done, we provided safety videos that Kristen Maddox and her team put together for us in coordination with our health assistants and Ms. Dampier's staff. That turned out great. If you haven't seen them, we will definitely share them with you so you can see. All staff are going through those training videos so that they can understand what they need to do in order to be safe with students and staff coming back to school. We have also done cleaning videos. Health training for principals is actually taking place tomorrow. You remember when you were a principal and you had to go in and get trained to be the backup for the health assistant? Well, now we're training 2 additional people, so we've got a total of 4 at each school this year because we've got to have someone who could potentially work in the health room, someone who could potentially have to be in the COVID room, and someone who could potentially have to be in the isolation room. So we've got lots of moving parts there. Hopefully we don't get to that point very much. Then we've had lots of other PD for a lot of the things that Mr. Meyer will talk about. I won't steal his thunder. Lastly, substitute training and recruiting substitutes. We are amidst that work right now. Dr. Suit and her team is doing an excellent job at trying to get additional subs in because we know that substitutes are going to be a commodity that we've got to have. Then lastly, the other item that we have worked through is the logistics of how we are going to actually have kids on campus and how are we going to function through a school day. Not to bore you with any more of my presentation, but the principals, their work with us on this, again, has been brilliant in their ideas. It's to a point sometimes where we say, and we even did this with the teachers, was, okay, here's our problem. Let's come up with a solution. And before we could even, us collectively as cabinet could even think of something, they were shooting us back, hey, what about doing it this way? And we're like, perfect, that works, and putting it together. So, I mean, it's a collaborative effort. And that is kind of, hopefully that I didn't muddy that up too much, but that is kind of like what has been going on with human capital and operations and also with principals.
Oh, that's great.
Well,
Great information.
thank you, Mr. Bass. I don't know what everyone else is going to, no, I'm kidding.
Or should we wait until the end, or should we, for each individual department, have the questions? It's your call.
I think it might be best to run through the presentation because some of the questions you may have will lead into the next presentation to honor everyone's time. I think we do one presentation and we'll, as long as we need to answer questions you all may have or problem solve with you, we are willing. So with that, we'll go straight down the line to Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Dr. Moore. Thank you, Dr. Moore. And through the chair, I just do want to tell one quick little story here. Listening to Mr. Bass, one of the remarks that he said as far as working with our teachers union, CWA, I remember the first time we went to go meet with them, and that was back in February, and the concern was the contract as far as money. And I was like, let's talk about instruction. Let's talk about instruction. But the teachers care about instruction. I say that to tell you right now, the problem solving that we're doing with our CEA and what the teachers are really passionate about right now, they're passionate about their kids. They want to know this is going to work. They want to know they're doing a good job. They want training on the platforms that we're going to be utilizing, not because they're worried about their paycheck, because they worry about the quality of education the kids are getting, and it's inspiring. And so I love working with them. The conversations we've had with Ms. Freeland, they have all been collaborative and with one singular purpose in mind, and that's the best service of our students. So it is exciting to get to talk about instruction and curriculum and not talk about some of the other things, although Mr. Bass did a phenomenal job talking about how safe we're going to be. But in that, you know, it is part of the work that we did earlier this year to reorganize. I think it's really paying dividends. You know, we had tremendous people here in different job roles doing different tasks, but being able to reorganize CNI into a division or a Department of Educator Quality and a Department of Academic Success right now during this period of time when we are, you know, 100 miles an hour, I can really tell you that decision, Dr. Moore's decision, is paying off. Dr. Lord and the amount of professional development they are delivering to those teachers has just been unreal. And so this is what I was alluding to, Ms. Berenborg. We have just a catalog and a timeline of trainings. I mean, right now there is stuff for going on right now. If you go up there, it is a hustle and it is a bustle of every one of our curriculum specialists either delivering professional development to a cadre of teachers, or they're developing the next round, or they're reflecting on what we delivered and improving it to move forward. The partnership in the reorganization with instructional services has been phenomenal as well. So as you look at this, you know, the IT folks, you know, Greg and his team have always been phenomenal, and we appreciate the partnership with them because they are the experts in answering the questions around some of the nuts and bolts of the software, but they have teamed with us and our curricular specialists to make sure it's being implemented in a way that has the biggest impact on the standards. And so as that has been rolling out, it has been phenomenal to watch. We are prepared to quickly make this shift to train all teachers if necessary. Right now, we're working through, you know, coming back 2 weeks early is just amazing. I mean, to have 15 days with the teachers, we're really able to work through things, and I think everyone's going to be very, very confident. But you think to yourself, you would prioritize the trainings the first 7 days, which is where we're at, and a lot of the safety stuff is the forefront on people's minds, so I know that that's been front-loaded to make sure that we're covering, you know, how to wear the mask, or these procedures are going to roll. You know, the teachers that are in their new instructional assignment, we want to make sure that they prioritize that instruction of, okay, here's a new, you know, Spanish textbook. We want to make sure they know how to do that before that we move into what it's going to be like when we close down. But that catalog and that calendar of training is there and be well developed so we can continue to deliver that to each and every teacher so that we're well prepared to make any shifts that we need to. Another big piece of what we're able to do through that reorganization was the acquisition of so many instructional coaches. And so tomorrow, Dr. Lord and they've already had a couple meetings, but they're meeting again tomorrow, just constant cycles of inquiry as far as what's working and how we support the teachers. But as we said in the military, that is certainly a force multiplier. Being able to bring in those coaches to train them, have them go back out to the schools and train the teachers is another layer of support that, you know, that foresight that Dr. Moore pushed out a couple of months ago, I think is really another instance that's paying huge dividends to the district. As far as working on the academic success with Ms. Becerra, we went through a huge master schedule redesign. You know, when I got here looking at, you know, which courses students were enrolled into, why, how we identified them to be in certain course codes as far as honors or intervention, you know, or advanced, whatever it was, a ton of work was put in by the principals and the counselors to redesign that master schedule. And here we are. And my hat is off to them. It is amazing to watch them work. If you've seen some of the tweets and some of the folks at Vero Beach High School with 4 or 5 screens just rocking and rolling, the fact that we've been able to create what no one's ever created in the history of education, of this choice, true choice, as far as the instructional model that you're going to be delivered And when we look back on this, it's incredibly stressful. If you don't like stress, although I love the challenge. Like I said, I love talking about instruction all day. But to think the work that we put in to make every parent that we possibly can, every student that we possibly can feel comfortable with where they're going to be in 2 weeks. And really, Dr. Moore said this too, this enables our teachers to have choice, because if we didn't offer the parents choice for the school-based virtual or a transitional model where they can teach from home, then our teachers who need those accommodations, they wouldn't have that opportunity as well. So I think that that's another instance that shows our partnership with our union, with our staff to develop the best possible solutions, is why we don't see some of the problems that you're seeing across the state, because we're solving problems together, which are creating opportunities for staff, and they're creating wonderful opportunities for the students. But all of that needs to have output. It has to have impact. It's not just to do it to get a new master schedule developed. It's to do it so that it's reflective, and that we use those coaches, that we analyze what's going on in those virtual or in those transitional classes to continue to support the students so they have the best 180 days that they can possibly have. And so some things have gone into that. The pacing guides have been adjusted. We've reduced the assessment. No matter what form of instruction you're getting, it's all aligned to the school district of Indian River County's pacing guide. So that's tremendous work when you think of what that takes for K through 12 and all the core areas. Our curriculum specialists have, partnered with teachers that are in the classrooms to modify this to make sure that it's all aligned to the platform. So if a student moves from option 1 to 2 to 3, that they're not going to have this disjointed, I was doing fractions a month ago and here it is, we're doing the same lesson. That's not going to occur, because they'll be able to move as they need to. And just like I said, that I'm so proud of the work they've done. They're exhausted there, but I hope they hear me, and I hope they hear how proud we are of them and the work that's being done in partnership with other offices. As we are, Mr. Bass has alluded to the number of teachers that his wonderful team has helped ensure that they get the protections that they need. But that creates challenges. It creates challenges in the master schedule, that when you have hired X number of science teachers and now this, Y number of them need an accommodation, how do we balance that? How do you balance that across 13 elementary schools when varying numbers of parents in each grade level at each school want to have these different models? And so Dr. Moore brought it up the other day. I mean, his master schedule, what did you say, Dr. Moore?
33,400.
Right. I mean, we're doing it 15,000 kids across the district. So got to give Kelly a pat on the back, because there are days where it's like, I can't make one more change. It's like, no, we're going to figure this out. It's a puzzle. We've got this. And we'll continue to do it as many times as we need to provide the support for the teachers and the parents to make sure that they feel comfortable where they're at. But it's a challenge. I'm not going to lie. It's a lot of work by folks in human capital and the principals, and going back and saying, this person with this certification, what can we have them do? And the willingness of the teachers themselves to buckle down and say, I've got this. It's inspiring to me to be part of that team. So another piece that we were added to the CNI pie was the extended day program, and Ms. Emerson is supervising that. And so just a complete revolution of what our after-school programs are going to look like. Obviously, we have some questions, about coming back to school, but we recognize that, before and after school are certainly time periods that we want to maximize student impact. There were a couple of grants that we were aggressive in pursuing and designing. The Ms. Emerson led. The Governor DeSantis had his educational initiatives as far as summer recovery, so we were awarded those, and we'll be rolling out those in support of our students as they return. In conjunction with the extended day program, innovations as far as extended day, that we can register the students online, you can pay online. Like I said, many instances where students are going to have free access to after-school activities in certain situations, depending on the criteria of that grant. So Ms. Emerson has certainly been pulling her weight in the few weeks that she's been there. Very supportive. I know everyone's aware of Osceola magnet situation. Ms. Emerson was out there, very, very supportive. And that was another instance that I would say, we had questions, what's going to happen? Well, let's just ask the teachers. And the teachers at Osceola Magnet were problem solvers throughout the entire process, and we're really showing what this district is made of. So certainly something to be very, very proud of. The Unity Week, I'll just, I don't know, Pam, I hope you're going to highlight this, but just say I'm proud of you guys, what y'all are doing. I know the coaches and the partnership with Dr. Lord. I'll let Pam talk more about what Unity Week is going to be, but the partnership with Learning Alliance and the instructional coaches to get there. Very excited about the next couple weeks. And then another thing that I've collaborated with some of Ms. Dampier's staff, Dr. McMahon, when we started looking at the students that chose these different instructional models, we realized we needed a very quick, very efficient way to manage that process. And so Dr. McMahon built an app in Power BI that I can pull up right now, tell you exactly how many students at every school at every grade level that has selected these options, by ethnicity, by student performance. So every piece of this we're looking into, not just trying to survive, but to make it as impactful as possible. And so huge efforts across the district working in CNI to make sure that we're, pulling together, and it's been an exciting time. So Dr. Moore, I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Meyer.
Go on some more, but I know other people want to do theirs.
Move on to Mr. Fagan.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. There we go. Much
There you
better.
go.
Thank you. Thank you. I've been here just over a year. And so the two words that jump out at me that I see, not only with everybody at this table, but everybody within my team as well as in the other teams, is what I call a can-do attitude. At no point in time have I ever gone or been anywhere to where I can walk into a room and say, hey, we got a problem. And everybody says, okay. And they start writing down ideas, and they coming out with suggestions, and we're running things to ground, and we're figuring out if we can do it. Nobody has a bad attitude. Nobody minds working late. Nobody's complaining. Nobody's quitting. Nobody says, I can't do it no more. They always come back the next day. Last night, working on the AFR and the financials, we left at 8. We were here at 7:30 the next day, okay? Another thing that I find that's interesting is I don't see any parking lot meetings. You go to work and you talk, and then you go outside and you get about 3 or 4 people, and you're in the parking lot talking about what you was talking about. There's no parking lot meetings, because by the time you leave here, you're done. You've already talked, you've done your job, you've gone home. There is no reason to talk anymore in the parking lot about what you thought you should have done or should have said. You've already said it. Nobody's bashful. They will tell you exactly what they think, if they will work. They don't mind if you tell them you're wrong and show them they're wrong. That's a very good teamwork, okay? Proud to be a member of this team. So I'm gonna jump right into it. Basically, most of my stuff is support and logistics. First thing I wanna say is nobody's missed a payroll check. Payroll's processed every month, every time, every 2 weeks, everybody gets paid. Kudos off to that. Purchasing. Purchasing is supporting everything involving Mr. Bass, as well as, to a certain extent, Richard down there. Here are some of the things we've bought. We've bought over 72,000 3-ply masks. We've bought 2,100 pump hand sanitizers, 1,800 8-ounce hand sanitizers, 7,200 child's masks, 9,400 adult face shields, 8,000 packets of disinfectants, which is basically 640,000 wipes, 400 cases of multi-use wipes, which is basically 432 more wipes, 1,300 spray bottles, 38 bottles of water, 69 multi-cloth face masks, and a disinfectant mister for every school. Water's been delivered, and also the print shop has printed over 4,000 laminated signs. In support of CNI and all the work that they're doing at the schools and teaming up with them, Greg in the back has had regular meetings with CNI side by side, asking them, what do you need, what are you doing, when are you doing it, and when do you need it by? And at no point in time, to my knowledge, has Greg and his team ever failed to deliver. Some of the things that he has done, I'm going to start with the two most recent ones because I think they're neat, is one, he's created within Focus a seating chart, so the teacher can actually go in there, put the children where they're going to sit, so now you can figure out social distancing, anything goes on, you've got a seating chart. Another thing he has is extracurricular activities, where, when, and what is going on, who is there, going to have that in focus. Some of the other things he's done, as you know, we have probably put out over 5,000 devices. We have 5,000 more coming from Dell. 400 are being delivered to Storm Grove for their distribution on the 12th, tomorrow. We have another 4,000 coming. He's conducted over 100 trainings in 50 days, such as in Canvas, Teams, Focus, and et cetera. 32 summer trainings over the summer. He's also conducted new elementary school training for the teachers, or for the secretaries. Within Google, you have a thing called Google Enterprise Console. This allows you to track your devices. Where are they? If you lose it, you can ping it and find it. You can also push up any upgrades without having to bring the unit in. New password changes. Had to upgrade all the passwords. He's sending that out. Electronic sign-in and sign-out for teachers, so you do not have to have a pen to write a form down. Electronic leave form was implemented at the division and department levels. Now will be pushed out to all the schools. Assisted in the development of and pushing out the district collaborator.
Still not, no.
Moving on to that one.
What was
Code-
that? Can you repeat that?
Collaborator. Best I can do today. Code of conduct. Within the code of conduct, you have forms. You have to fill out the forms and sign the forms. If you go to some dealerships, car dealerships, you have massive forms to sign. Well, Greg and his team has done it all online. So all you gotta do is complete it online and send it in. You can still do paper, but in order to avoid that contact, you can do it all online. Online forms for enrollment and focus. And that's it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. I concur with the team that's sitting here today under the direction of Dr. David K. Moore. I mean, he really has put together a team of collaboration. We all feed off each other, we laugh, we enjoy work, but we also know that we got to get the job done. Like he says, get to work. So with that, I'm going to talk about my team as well. Thanks to Dr. Moore allowing me to reorganize my team. It was a team that was meshed together of ESC and student services, and now we have specific departments that can really focus on their particular area and become experts in that particular area. And so we're very pleased that with our health services, we have Mrs. Burney, who has worked very collaboratively with the health department, following the guidelines with the CDC. She's been a really asset to our team. We're constantly calling, speaking to her about communication. With that, she created, with the help of our media services with Mrs. Maddox, some videos created for all stakeholders for proper hand washing. I'm sure you saw that. We talked about it. Mask wearing, social distancing in classrooms, hallways, and cafeterias. She's also provided some professional development for all of our health assistants. It's very important that we're all on the same page. So on August 3rd, she provided that, and then she provided one-on-one professional development as well as conversations with them from August 4th through the 6th. Also, there's going to be some administrative training tomorrow as well to help schools with medication and to also go over the layout and procedures of the health room, the isolation room, and the nebulizer room to make sure that the layouts are there, that they have what they need in those particular classrooms. Also, she is creating for our principals the wellness screening. You know, our employees can volunteer to do that at the schools, so she is going to create a video and hand that out to have that available for our principals for next week so they can start training there. She's also, over the next 2 weeks, going to continue site visits just to do some checks, spot checks to make sure our health rooms have what they need again, that our 3 areas that we have our social distance as well as have the supplies that they need to make those rooms safe. Student services, I want to say again, thanks to the IT department who's been very instrumental, again, with the work with focus, making sure that, again, with the code of conduct, student code of conduct, we're very excited. We do have information on our website. This is the first time that we have gone paperless, as well as we have an overview of what the new code of conduct is on our website, some frequently asked questions and some information for our parents on there. We're very excited to talk about Unity Week, which will be the first 10 days of school. We have themes that have gone out to our principals. We had some question and answer webinars on August 5th and 6th for our teachers. Those activities will be theme-based. And along with those activities, we also provided some resources. So in case some teachers want to have some brain breaks throughout the day, there are additional resources for them to partake in. And with that, we also have, we focus on the students so much, we actually have some opportunities for our teachers and our staff. It's going to be called Development of Interventions to Support Reentry for them. And one of the sessions is Confess to Stress Skill Building Groups for faculty and staff. It's launching August 13th through August 21st, as well as parent and student skill building groups launching the week of August 24th. So our Student Services Department is really thinking about all of our stakeholders because we're all dealing with different things and at different levels. Very excited about some of the videos that our Student Services Department will have available. We have the mental health, we have them available right now, mental health, social, emotional, and learning, and reentry. Links and videos are on the website for parent and students. We also have launched, as of yesterday, Mindful Mondays, which are short 2 to 3 minute videos of relaxation strategies posted for our, you can partake, students can actually log on, parents can log on and actually do some of those relaxation strategies on there. We are also, we also have some professional development. Our school counselors, thanks again to the board that allowed us to build that foundation at the elementary level. Even though they just came back on August 10th, we feel like we really want to arm them with the resources that they need to be successful, but we've also been providing some training for those counselors that came back before the 10-month. We've offered some face-to-face, and we've done some teams trainings as well, because we want to make sure that they are supportive of our students and they're as a support as well. We also have some mental health and social work groups that started on August 3rd through the 7th. And then we did something really unique. We are offering this on the Collaborator, which is our platform where we're communicating to all and being transparent. We have a get to know section, and on that get to know section, we're going to post some additional information where schools can actually sign up for the 90-minute self-care, trauma-informed care training. We did our first one yesterday with Sebastian River High School, and that was because they asked for that. And we're going to have other schools that want to sign up. We'll be more than willing to provide that support for those schools. We also created a Live Binder, which social emotional learning and mental health resources for our stakeholders, for our teachers. We have that for self-care and trauma-informed care for support staff, teachers, and we're also going to train our SRO officers on tomorrow with the 6-hour certification training on mental health, youth mental health, first aid training for them to equip them with what they need to help support in the schools. Because so many times we see them as the deputy, et cetera, but we can also utilize them in a supportive way as well. So that is health services and student services. I also want to say a huge thank you to my whole team, but of course with accountability and assessment, I would be remiss if I did not talk about, as Mr. Myers said, about Dr. McMahon just creating the Power BI and the apps that are in Power BI. We've seen school counselors come alive with being able to access graduation information in there, just at their fingertips, as well as the support that we've gotten as a team to work with the master schedule. So he's been knee-deep in working with Power BI as well as some of the other projects that we have going on. And then last but not least, we have the Exceptional Student Education Department under the direction of Mrs. Papalato. While we've done quite a bit in the short amount of time that she's transitioned as the director there. We had a meeting last Thursday with the ESE Superintendent Parent Advisory Council, and this is one of many that we've had throughout since March. And they really gave us some good feedback, and we were able to tweak some things from that feedback. And they also affirmed some of the work that we were doing as well. So that was one of the calls, as well as we had a call 2 weeks prior with them with just the ESE director. We really want to build capacity at the school sites, and we've been doing a lot of training with our resource specialists because they are housed at every one of our school sites. And we really want to build on their skill set and be that support system for our ESE students. Our director has also been making school visits one-on-one, also doing team meetings with our principals to make sure that they have what they need. She actually went out and worked with Wabasso and half-day morning to make sure that they were staffed correctly, to make sure they had the resources and support that they need, because they are our most fragile students. So she is making her rounds with school visits. We've also created, up under the ESC, videos outlining roles and responsibilities of virtual learning. You know, so many times we think of the general ed setting, but we also wanted to make sure that we thought of our ESC students and what does that look like from a virtual standpoint? What does that look like for self-contained if some of those students are, you know, choosing that option, as well as some of our students who are, they receive facilitative services. So we put together a video for that with the roles and responsibilities. We also met with Vero Beach High School, and this is very important, at Sebastian River High School to support the transition programs. Even though we're not doing as much, we still want to encourage that transition opportunities for our ESC students, because that gives them joy, that gives them a purpose, and we really want to make sure we support that role. But I want to say shout out to my team. They've done a really good job building by building together. We've come together, and I just want to say thank you. They've worked really hard, as well as the team that's sitting here, and Dr. Who's sitting back here in the back, Dr. Jacobs. She looks so different. Dr. Jacobs, she's worked really hard and leading us and helping us with this work. So kudos to them.
Ms. Maddox.
Thank you. Now that everyone's sure likes to talk about those videos, huh? No, it's true. As we're going down the line, everyone's scratching off and adding, because we all do collaborate on everything and work together every step of the way. So it's a great team to work with. We've had to learn new ways to engage our community throughout this COVID reality that we're living in right now. So these are just some of the things recently and since March that my team, my Office of Communications team, has worked on, and of course my cabinet team members and their staff, because we're all constantly collaborating on things. You all know we've had numerous Facebook Live sessions with different announcements from Dr. Moore and staff. Our town halls we have continued to do on a virtual level to make sure that our community is still informed with updates on our district. We've been broadcasting all of our school board meetings and workshops and coordinating board members' attendance on Teams. We had multiple videos on just the success covering when we first started our virtual instruction in March when schools closed. We had our week 1 success video. We have done family update videos featuring Dr. Moore. We did a really nice video from our teachers to our students called Dear Students. That was also highlighted in the media. We've been engaging our community with the Wheel of Opportunity. I'm not sure if you saw that. We were a lot more active when we first went under our stay-at-home, our safer-at-home order. But we were helping out local businesses, and they were helping us out with donations to people who would answer trivia questions, bringing them business, and you know, showing our community that we appreciate them as well, and we appreciate their engagement. We continued on with our virtual school choice fair. We had to cancel that, unfortunately, in person right when we started shutting things down. But we kind of flipped the switch and we did everything virtually, and we allowed principals to come and share information so that we still had a week covering all of the schools and their programs. As you know, graduation, that was quite an extensive thing to plan, and we had 2 graduations for each school. So our traditional graduations and our drive-through graduations that included a summary of a video highlight for that entire day that we shared. We have been supporting our departments through the different summits and leadership training. We've had our Reignite Ready to Launch, our Equity Day that we've supported with video, live streaming, any graphics, and pushing out information to the community about those events. We participated in Jumpstart 2020, which was our session where we updated all of our district leadership, new principals, APs, and staff. Each cabinet member spoke about new procedures and protocols that we were implementing for this new school year. We've continued all the normal programs that we normally would if we weren't under this situation, working under this situation. Our gold and silver schools, our volunteer of the year ceremonies, everything that we would normally do in person, we have just adjusted and made it still happen virtually. Of course, we're constantly monitoring social media and the internet to make sure that we are always in first place when it comes to the work of other school districts. We want to come out on top, and we normally do. August 17th through the 21st is Liftoff Week, where we're looking forward to pushing out the information that we've gathered to families, although it is already up on our website, the videos that my cabinet members were speaking of, the health and safety videos, the mental health videos, ESE videos, those will all be pushed out to get more of a focus on them. They're currently up on our reopening page, where anyone can go and view those and see what's going on in our district. But along with that week, it's just going to be kind of a last push of information to parents, like this is the last week before we start on the 24th, and making sure that they have all the information in one place that we've been working on and pushing out this entire time. We have held teacher question and answer sessions. My team has gathered questions from teachers and organized them so that the different cabinet members can go on Facebook Live and answer their questions. We had our reopening of schools video that highlighted what we were doing on campuses and transportation, district offices, kind of what a day would look like for a typical student on campus. That video was very highly viewed and shared throughout school districts and on the media. I think we were the first school district that came out with anything like that. And of course, our launch sequence video. I think that was my favorite video that we've done this entire time, that we coordinated with principals and district staff, and it was really nice because we've all been working so hard and under relatively stressful circumstances to just come together for a few minutes and do something like that and really enjoy ourselves, and then see the finished product when we did our liftoff presentation last week. I think that was last week. I think we've lost track of all time now. It felt like last week. So just like everyone else has spoken about the videos, our health and safety video trainings, cleaning procedures with Ann Reven, our mental health moments trainings that Dr. Packard shared with us, our instructional option video for options 2 and 3 that Mr. Meyer recorded, and our principal welcome back messages, which are messages from our principals that are they are specifically for their schools, welcoming back all students, not just students who are coming back brick and mortar, but students who are attending virtually as well. And we have a platform that we're building on our website right now. If you go and look around, information is slowly being added, but our reopening website will soon have a option 1, 2, and 3 page where parents, staff can go to those pages and see information that is specific to each one of those options so that they're constantly kept up to date with different information that's specific to their student's instructional option. We have been working on collaborating with the communication flowcharts that we're using that Mr. Bass was explaining earlier for different COVID-related procedures, and getting our signs designed and decals ordered for all of our campuses to display. Those will all be put up this week before orientation, before we have any live visits to campuses. We've had several reporters reach out asking to come and take pictures and video our campuses because we are one of the first school districts that hasn't opened yet to be ready with this well ahead of time. And we will be creating a video as soon as all the signage is in place, another video to go through and show families this is what the campus is going to look like. This is the signs that you'll see. We we created the signs to all be consistent with each other, coming from the district, same logo, same look, so that when you walk onto a campus, you see the same sign. It's not different. You know what to expect when you're on one of our campuses. So those signs and the decals that we have purchased, those will all be going up this week, and we're looking forward to producing that next video as well. Last but not least, of course, we are utilizing all communication platforms to push out information to students and staff more than ever. Finding new ways to communicate, our school messenger calls, texts, social media, website. There's always a team of people behind you when you're working. So Lori Webb, webmaster, she keeps information up on the website. Like, you wouldn't believe you could send Lori a request at 1 a.m. and it would be up at 1:03, So I have to give her a shout out because she's absolutely amazing getting that information organized. And I know that we probably send it to her kind of scattered sometimes, and I know I do. Sorry, Lori. And that is it from the Office of Communications.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cabinet members. When I was interviewing for this position, one of the questions that Ms. Justice actually had for me is, I'm concerned because you come from Miami and you have such a large team to get all of this work done. And I understood it, and I shook my head and said, yeah, but this is the right place for me, and was able to make that persuasion to have the opportunity. And what I can tell you, Ms. Justice, is this team continues to produce as the Army did in Miami. And those that stand behind them are few. But I continue to push as if I still had that Army, and this team continues to produce. So I cannot thank them enough for the work that they are doing, the work that they are leading. That includes their direct reports as well as principals. This work is well in progress based on the leadership that's at this table and the leadership that's in our schools. The expectation that we're presenting today isn't a complete product. This is a work in progress. So our goal today is to provide this update. There are some additional things that I would like to capture. I know as each cabinet member presented, there's probably 10 things. We can probably go back around a second round and they can add. There are a few things that I would like to highlight based on our reflection, our growth, and the opportunity for us to educate ourselves as we have grown this plan. One of which is the revision of our wellness screenings and temperature checks. And in doing our research and in seeking guidance from the American Academy of Pediatrics, both locally and across the state, and reading their research and recommendations that they submitted to the governor, is to enhance our process. And that temperature checks is an opportunity, is one stop measure, but it should not be the only stop measure. So in reviewing that research and reaching out to a number of different superintendents on the process that we are using, we are taking a comprehensive process to include temperature checks, but to include it in a way in which we're taking into account the social, emotional, psychological development of children. And that's input from school psychologists that in doing or completing that process, you want to ensure that you're mentally and not only academically, but mentally taking care of children. So going through the wellness screening, identifying when temperature checks need to occur, discreetly moving children to a location using the identified volunteers who would be trained on how to complete this process, ensures that we're looking at multiple symptoms in order to ensure that we're providing the highest level of comfort and security within our buildings as we allow children into our buildings. Also, shift in the plan is moving to the 3 clinical spaces that Ms. Dampierre mentioned. We have the health space, the quarantine space, as well as the nebulizer rooms. So rather than be one separate room based on the nebulizer and the airborne that's in that room, as well as the quarantine and the typical health room, we will have 3 separate locations for each of those rooms. We have been proactive in creating, as Mr. Bass was saying, opportunities to enhance notification protocols for students and staff as it relates to contact tracing. So one of the things that Mr. Bass, and I'll highlight on just briefly, is a school response team. So we have a district response team as well as a school response team. School response teams will be coordinating who is going to contact individuals who need to self-quarantine. So we believe it is our obligation to have an adult call, an informed adult who can answer questions regarding the social distancing, the length of time. We will be able to quickly coordinate that effort based on some of the information that Mr. Fagan shared, that Mr. McDonald is putting together. I think we undersold that. This is an opportunity to be on the forward end of knowing what students were around an individual who has been tested positive. At a few clicks, we can go into Canvas and we'll know who are the students sitting around that particular individual to identify who needs to self-quarantine. If they're in a particular club, we can collect that information. We will not be scattering and trying to figure out who we need to do this. We'll have that information available on the front end. Having the district individuals will serve as the conduit between us and the health department, not putting that expectation on principals. So the protocol will allow a principal to work the school site team, allow the district to coordinate with the health department, really to streamline and be very quick and expedient in this process in order to get the information to those as quickly as possible. So we'll have adults through the notification team at schools, provide that information to them, let them know the length of the time of a quarantine based on when they were exposed. And I think we've covered that information in detail. We will also be transparent in sharing that information with all members of the school community, whether it be staff and students, through a messenger, letting them know there has been a positive case. You are receiving this message to inform you. You do not have to quarantine, but a message to allow them to know that there has been something. One of the things that we have learned, that I'm sure that Mr. Bass can elaborate on, is this person has, or this person, the level of awareness regarding what to do is significant, and we're going to be able to provide that training in the coming week to all of our faculties and staff so they know. I don't have to worry about the rumor mill. I know this is the protocol that will be communicated. So we will communicate to those who have to quarantine based on the two teams coming together to work the protocol, as well as all individuals in the school community so they know. We've also looked at being very explicit. So one of the within this document is an explicit couple of pages regarding what to do for a possible exposure to COVID. So we have been very explicit in saying if a employee has symptoms related to COVID, they will secure a substitute if they are a teacher and/or notify their principal. They will be considered for the FFCRA/FMLA within 48 hours. They'll obtain the screening from a health professional. The health professional may require a test or may not require a COVID test. They will stay home until that COVID test is returned. With a negative, they would return to work. But if they go to the doctor, they complete the appropriate paperwork, they send it to us, they go to the doctor, and the doctor says, COVID is not a concern here, you can return to work. We're still going to pick up those 2 days. When I say pick up the day, the district will cover the cost of those 2 days. Why? Because we want to ensure that we're providing an environment when people are concerned about their own personal health. We're going above and beyond to afford the opportunity without cost of their days to go to the particular doctor. Now, that doesn't preclude an individual from staying home. My back hurts, I sprained my knee, I'm not feeling well, not a COVID symptom. Obviously, they call in and secure the sub, but when it's a possible COVID symptom, and we're also providing that additional awareness regarding what are the possible symptoms of COVID. So we are going to ask them when a positive case, that will be an additional amount of time, 14 days from the onset of the return of that particular test, and then return to work for our employees with a release from the doctor or a negative test. Very similar protocol with our students, different guidelines, as you know, when we're dealing with students and requirements in terms of keeping their information confidential, but really asking parents and giving them a level of comfort if their child is being tested to inform the principal, and if they have a positive case to inform us, which allows us to be as quick as possible in implementing our protocols to do the quarantine. As we have mentioned with the health department, some of that information isn't coming as swift as we would like. So we want to help and facilitate the delivery of that information to work with them as quickly as we possibly can. That's some of the work that Mr. Bass was speaking through. So as we have that information, students will be able to work on their, what we're calling our contingency plans. This is the instruction that teachers will review with their students upon arrival. So on a typical school day, teachers go through classroom procedures, expectations, and now they go through classroom expectation, procedures, social distancing requirements, and if you have to quarantine or if a school has to close, we predetermine where students will go, i.e. Canvas, to begin or continue with that work. So predetermined work communicated to students so we can continue the instructional day even if we have to close or modify a school assignment or responsibility. Once again, when students, very similar process in returning to work for students, we have, through our health experts or our health practitioners in our schools, we will be reaching out to those students on day 9 if they have not returned with the, to ensure, do we need to do anything else? Is everything following through? So additional support and guidance for them as they move through that process. We are, I think, the only district that I can find that is having the conversation and predetermining when we're going to consider school closure. And it would be naive of me not to have this conversation publicly with you as the board or to be prepared. So the provisional work or the contingency work that we're creating is a proactive measure, and then looking to problem solve with the health department for consideration. We're using the 5% of student and staff population or 20% of the instructional staff. So that becomes a case-by-case conversation, and it will be a almost a dashboard type of where we are with the response team that Mr. Bass is leading and looking at teachers that are out. One of the things that we are doing is a high level of support from this district office in going into schools and providing that needed support when needed. So one of the things I've said a number of times, this plan doesn't work without us going in and helping with the entering and exiting of schools, helping with the supervision of lunch, and in some cases helping with the supervision of students. And there may be cases where we are providing supervision in a classroom, teacher has quarantined for precautionary measures, but can do their work and willing and wants to do, as Mr. Meyer was saying, our teachers go above and beyond as standard practice, want to continue to provide that instruction. They'll log on Teams, rest of the class could be there, maybe the entire class would be there, provide that instruction, facilitate lessons, and kids can come and have groups. So that's one of the innovative ways that we're exploring with our teachers to continue the instruction in that brick and mortar option as we continue to look at what are those possibilities. So as Mr. Bass said, we do not want to be scrambling, or we do not want to be, well, what do we do, or how do we figure this out? We want all of those scenarios to take place. One of the things that Ms. Hofer is doing is putting together that presentation for principals. So it's going to be consistently delivered by our principals, but developed here as a resource to our principals to ensure that's being communicated effectively regarding the creation of their school site teams that they will create, the expectation of those teams, as well as the district team and how they're going to interact, how they communicate. There is if you look back in the protocol, very explicit, you will contact Mr. Seymour, who will serve as the lead, dispatch the team. Principals will know exactly, okay, let me pull this information, let me pull seating charts, let me look and see if there are any particular clubs. Let me begin to pull some of that research together so when the team arrives, we can go through the protocol, make the decisions, and determine the number of students or faculty that need to quarantine quarantine, work with the health department regarding the length of time to quarantine, and then implement the plan. Do we want that to happen? Absolutely not. Are we the largest employer in this county? Yes, we are. So we should anticipate, even though the trend continues in a very positive direction, still with 13 days remaining, we need to continue to be vigilant. There are a number of opportunities moving into the next 2 weeks. I'll have the opportunity, above and beyond the school site visits that Mr. Bass and Cabinet will be conducting, to look at the readiness for opening of schools. But for me to visit, connect with teachers, connect with principals regarding where we are, where we need to shift or modify. We're not celebrating that this is a one-and-done process. This is an ongoing process where we continue to look at the reality and continue to listen. And I think one of the key ingredients of what will be our successful opening is listening and putting health and safety at the forefront of the conversation and willing to make shifts or modifications to keep everyone in a place where they feel safe. We're doing the same as it relates to instruction. And the conversations with principals is quickly moving from the creation of master schedules, which was solidified. The parents will be getting their schedules tomorrow. If they haven't already, they'll be released on Focus. That was a commitment that we made, so we're happy to have met that timeline. But it goes to quality instruction in all three of those models. And some of the most intriguing data or concerning data Mr. Meyer kind of touched on through the creation of the dashboard that Dr. McMahon has created is these students who are selecting option 2 and option 3. And I would be remiss if I didn't say the platform options are significantly different than what we exposed students to at the close of school last year. They are aligned to the standards. And they are still at your pace. That's the only thing that's the same. But these are not resources created by our teachers, especially with an option 2. It is a standards-aligned, platform-driven process, which is at the level or the rigor of the standard. So it is going to be a significantly different opportunity. And I think some of the forward work that we've done, which I don't know that we caught, but we've taken the time to look at the pathway that these new options will provide and ensure that it's aligned to our own pacing guides. What do we call them here, Mr. We don't call them pacing guides. Their own pacing guides. So what happens, all right, option 2 isn't for me, I'm coming back. You're not coming back to a completely different environment. I know Mr. Meyer mentioned that, but that is not easy work. Pacing guides take an entire summer to create. We've been able to begin the alignment of those to ensure when a child becomes moving from one option to the other, when that comfort is at a good place and they want to return, we're able to do that. So the effort of the district team has been significant. An assurance to everyone, not only our board members, but to our community, that we are in this work with our principals. We will be in our schools supporting with our principals, providing the resources that they need, really working collaboratively to ensure that we get this right in the midst of what is a very, very challenging time. So with that, board members, that is the presentation. I know it was a bit lengthy, but I definitely wanted to highlight the volume of work that goes above and beyond just this document that is in progress to ensure a successful opening of schools. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. So let's go in order of who spoke first. So Mrs. Barrenborg, questions for Mr. Bass?
Yes, for Mr. Bass. Thank you. I'm glad I wrote their names down next to my notes. All right. First of all, let me just say thank you, everybody. What a lot of work this is. And as a board member, this is not an easy decision to start school. There's a lot of criticism about us allowing kids to come back into brick and mortar. There are a lot of people that are watching that are saying how wrong everything is and haven't really looked at the depth of research and what you guys have been able to put together. So I'm really encouraging people to do that and to look at this plan. And I feel more encouraged by the fact as a board member that I feel a little bit better with some of the decisions that we're making, because I know that not every school board has that same feeling. I happened to be in another community this weekend where I saw an article about that. And there are a lot of communities and school boards that are doing that, running around and worrying part. And I know that you guys are thinking ahead, so I appreciate that. Your plan is very flexible, and it's had to be because of all the updates that are coming out weekly, if not hourly. So I get that. You can say one thing and then turn around and you have to reverse it or change it because of whatever the CDC is saying, or the American Academy of Pediatrics is saying, or our local mental health department is saying. As new information emerges, I know that the plan that we just got presented may change again, and we understand that. It's a detailed plan. I think bi-weekly meetings is awesome. You're getting lots of communication from lots of people, which I appreciate. Now for my specific questions. So the district and school response teams, and again, a proactive way to handle this. You talked about confidentiality, but with HIPAA laws. What exactly, could you clear that up? Because I know there are people concerned about if we have a positive case, how are we protecting student ID? How are we not getting this out? How is it not going out on social media about, who's spreading COVID in the schools? Could you please speak to HIPAA laws and how we're going to be able to work within that to do this contact tracing?
Through the chair. So it's kind of like what Dr. Moore said, and I did not allude to it. If we had somebody who was exposed and we would identify to them, you have potentially been exposed, it is our determination that you need to quarantine. We're not going to tell them who it was. Also, if we have someone who was not exposed, but yet there was a case at their school, then we would send out that message and say just that, not saying anyone's names. Now, what we have already learned is, to begin with, everybody will know, well, who was it? Who was it? You say you can't tell. As this thing moves on, unfortunately, this is going to become so commonplace that people are no longer going to be wanting to know the names, because the inquiry of who it is what everyone's attached to at first. But then it's like, okay, was I around them or not? And that's the thing where we're going to have to win over the confidence of our staff and our students to know that what we are doing and how we are doing it is thorough and we are protecting them. And I won't lie, that is going to be a tough task, particularly with our parents and our students. I mean, because ultimately we are working with the most valued commodity of a community, is our children.
Oh, thank you for that. It reminds me of when I was a teacher and we were trained about when HIV came in, and you can't know the child, but you can't even be told if you were exposed. So the training went like this: just imagine that everybody has it. So, I appreciate the fact that we're protecting students and protecting confidentiality.
And through the chair, I think part of the creation of the teams is to ensure that the need to know information is only being provided. If you reference the document, it's to the principal, really controlling who even knows, taking extra step in order to ensure that we're not oversharing that information.
Okay, the next question was about plexiglass. You mentioned that we've added plexiglasses in our school offices. I've seen that. Some offices have some interesting plexiglass situations, so I'm hoping we clear that up before school starts. Some people have sent us lots of emails about suggestions of things that we purchase and things that we do, and and well-meaning. So could you discuss our use of plexiglass in the classrooms and why we are doing it or aren't doing it, and what the advantage or disadvantage is for that?
I'll hit on two things. I'll hit on plexiglass, and I'll also hit on shower curtains. Plexiglass is a good alternative idea. And I just saw on the Today Show this morning of kids at a desk or a table, and they had a plexiglass between them. We saw where a neighboring, or not a neighboring district, but another district in the state of Florida said that they were going to buy plexiglass and it were going to outfit their entire school to the tune of several $1,000,000. You know, I think it comes to a point of economic feasibility too. That's got to be taken into consideration. But the one thing that plexiglass does present, and we haven't really thought about, or maybe you have, maybe you haven't, is that is yet another surface that can be contaminated by people touching it who may potentially have COVID. So that enlists a whole nother thought of, okay, now we've got to clean that. Let me hit on shower curtains real briefly, because I, like you on the news, have seen shower curtains be put up in classrooms. One of the things that it does is it prevents the airflow to take place in the classroom. Now, we have looked and we have researched how we can improve fresh air intake and airflow in our classrooms by turning those on earlier in the day and running them into the evenings. We're hoping to dissipate any viral contaminants within the classroom. That curtain, shower curtain in there, is just going to prevent that flow. And yet again, it is another surface that can be contaminated.
And I appreciate you led right into my next question, which was on air purifiers. What prevents, or why should they or shouldn't they, a teacher bring in their own air purifier in their classroom? I have two in my home. Why not?
It may make you feel better, but in essence, it is not really providing the purification that needs to occur to combat the whole classroom. I mean, it's just, you know, the little ones that you can unplug and plug in. My wife has one by the bed, and I'm thinking, what's that? Just a noise to help you sleep better. But it's not going to purify the whole room. I mean, it's like this big.
Depends on the size you buy. I'm just,
Yeah.
Okay, because that has also been
Yeah.
offered to me as why can't people buy that and bring it in? Well, again, there's a cost factor, and we're not going to require teachers to do that,
Right.
nor, I think it goes back to when teachers were bringing air fresheners into school, and they thought that was helping, but what they didn't realize is that you have kids that have allergies against that. So we have to be very cognizant, I think, of all kids in the classroom. I appreciate the fact that you've thought of everything: transportation, food service, drills, labor relations, training, backup systems, substitutes, logistics, seating charts. So will parents be able to access those seating charts in the classroom?
My first answer would be, I do not know that we would have the ability to do that. I think and I look to Ms. DiAgresta, and she's getting ready. I think we're going to run into some confidentiality.
Exactly. I wanted
there?
to be able to present that because that has been brought to my attention as well, is, will I know who my child is sitting next to in the classroom? Will I know who they're sitting next to in the bus? Will I know all these things? And I see now that you're touting that you're putting it on focus and we're making all these great seating charts, but is that really accessible information to other people?
I don't believe that is even accessible.
Hey, thank you.
I would defer to the chair.
Mrs. Sork, may I?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Mrs. Berenborg, while the district could put out a template seating chart which shows here are 10 seats and here are the seats where students will be sitting, it would be in violation of both federal and state law for the district to then place Susie sits in seat 1 and Davy sits in seat 3, and the identification of the students in the seats is problematic, but a template chart that says every third seat will be a student, that sort of information would be okay.
Exactly. I just wanted to bring that to light, and I knew that answer. I just wanted to make sure that people understand that we have to be very careful and we have to be confidential in those situations. So that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Rosario, Mr. Bass, questions? Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, it takes a little while for me to unmute. Thank you for all of this information. And my question for Mr. Bass is regarding the athletic departments and the work that Mr. Seymour has done. I had a question a couple of weeks ago that was really thrown out there, and I knew at the time there wasn't probably enough research on what the answer might be, considering what we're facing. But would you happen to know what our response is going to be at the school levels with regard to CPR and our AED monitors, our AED equipment that is at the schools? Those are mandatory in case, and there are people at the school levels who are the designated CPR and AED, I don't want to say monitors, but those who are certified in that area. But considering everything that's going on, do you know if Mr. Seymour and the team have looked into this and how schools are going to respond specifically with the sports?
Through the chair. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Rosario, each year the coaches go through a CPR update and have to be retrained and certified in that. Mr. Seymour will be able to speak to that, but I'm sure, and I can get you that answer as to when they've been trained for this year. Additionally, you have the people identified to be able to use the AEDs at the schools, and I can get you the update as to when those were retrained also, because they have to go through a retraining.
Yeah, so I would just, if your team would pay close attention to maybe what the health department might recommend for us at the school levels on how to handle someone who is, God forbid, in cardiac arrest. Maybe the person had symptoms, didn't reveal those symptoms. Maybe the person might be COVID positive, and yet here you have someone who is performing CPR from our staff. Obviously, I mean, in good faith, you're trained in it. You want to provide CPR or AED, but in this case, what do we do? I mean, we might not have an answer here, but do we just call 911 and wait for 911 to come? Is there going to be a specific protocol for us to follow? And I think that, under your direction, Mr. Seymour and yourself and the team might want to take a deeper look into this so that those protocols might be included in whatever has already been created with regard to athletics and our schools in general.
Yes, ma'am, we will.
Thank you. I also had a question. I forgot who it was. Sorry, Madam Chair. With regard to the forms in focus.
Well, right now the questions are for Mr. Bass.
If it wasn't Mr. Bass, I'll wait for whomever else it might be.
Okay, that was Mr. Fagan when we get to Mr. Fagan. All right. Any other questions for Mr. Bass? Mrs. Justice?
Yes, thank you very much.
Did you have one more question, Mrs. Rosario, for Mr. Bass?
No. Well, I had a question with regard to the COVID district staff team. I might actually ask the question. Well, I'm glad that the district created a COVID team. And that's important, so we know who to ask specific questions of, and that we know that things are not going to get lost in the shuffle, specifically with contact tracing. So I wanted to thank you on that. I don't recall having that as part of any of my previous conversations on our plans on reopening, so I think that that's a great thing. And so I wanted to thank you in advance for that. And then the follow-up for Mr. Fagan might be addressed for the team, but I guess when we get there, you'll let me know.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Justice?
Thank you very much. Mr. Bass, you spoke about substitutes and needing substitutes, building up that team, and I want to talk to you a little bit about substitute pay. In the past, I had inquired about, and the board had inquired about sub pay, and it's about $12 an hour. And, it's kind of crazy, to be honest with you, and I want to really question the district. If we want high-quality subs who are willing to come in, and especially in this situation now, knowing some of the things that we know, how are we Are we valuing our substitute teachers in the right way? Is $12 an hour, while it may be comparable to other districts or not, and I know we've done a study, I know that the Human Resources Department did look into at one point what other subs were being paid, but I do have some concerns regarding that. And I have a number of other questions, but I'll let you answer that first.
Yes, ma'am, through the chair. That is definitely something that Dr. Suit and I have talked about. I'll be honest with you, COVID catching up on us. I mean, you know, us being, Dr. Moore coming in January and Mr. Meyer and I coming in February, and then COVID hits in March is something that we have not addressed yet. I have a feeling that we probably need to look at it sooner rather than later. I did see where other school districts from in another state really addressed the sub pay and amped it up for the period of COVID. Now, they are going to resort back to their previous pay once COVID is over. I think it's something that we need to look at to bump up beyond COVID.
Okay, thank you very much. Students, one of the things I did this weekend was make my children wear masks for an extended period of time. It's one thing to wear it for 20 minutes, it's another thing to wear it for a day, and to take it off and put it on and take it off and put it on. And some people play with their masks and touch them. I won't name any names. Just a question about the lanyards and the slide cards for students. If they could, if there's some way we could maybe attach a clip to the lanyard or something so that when the mask is not in use for the student, that they would be able to secure it to their person so that we don't have masks lying everywhere. So just a thought, if you fold it in half, you're able to keep it clean and contained. So just a thought to that. The other question is, the district will be giving each student 2 masks. They are cloth reusable masks, and there will be, if a student comes to school without a mask on, it's my understanding a disposable mask will be provided to them. Has the district looked into cleaning the masks that on campus or off campus, cleaning the reusable masks in any way? I know that a lot of our students and families struggle with access to laundry or other things, and keeping the masks clean is going to be very important in ensuring their efficacy, I would imagine. So have we looked into these? I don't know how much it would cost to put a washer and dryer on each campus or out or somewhere, it's centralized location, but just a question about that.
Through the chair, we should have a washer and dryer in each cafeteria because they're going to have hand towels and stuff that they have to wash. We have not really discussed washing students' cloth mask, and I just want to say that the cloth mask, we got 67,000 donated from the Department of Health and Emergency Management. They acquired those through the state. I was told, and hopefully it's still true, that there are more that are available. We will be obviously asking for more also moving forward. But that is something we can look at. You know, I think, again, and so much of this is based on the trust that our parents and our students have in us. It's something that, you know, if we say we're going to wash your mask for you, or we have spare mask available that may have been reused, you know, we've got to make sure that we take the necessary precautions to ensure that they are clean and contaminant-free.
Sure, yeah, and I would imagine that the district would be able to handle that process. So, you know, one of the things we don't talk a lot about with COVID is the environmental impact of a lot of the things that we're doing right now, including using an enormous amount of paper and PPE goods, right, consumables. So, you know, I would hope if a mask falls on the ground or something, or we find them, I would imagine when you walk through schools, you will see masks, places left behind. And, you know, I hope we're not throwing them away. I hope that we're you know, taking into consideration that these things cost money, there's an impact to the environment. I continue to have real concerns and questions regarding nebulizer rooms. I have spoken to several local doctors, and they also share the concerns about the nebulizer rooms. When Miranda Hawker was here from the Department of Health, I specifically asked about that, and she said that perhaps the nebulizer treatment would be given outside. So I continue to have real concerns about the nebulizer room. It aerosolizes secretions, and those secretions get on clothing, they get on in hair, they get in a lot of different places, not only for the student, but now we have a health assistant that's going to be in that room. So I have some real concerns about the nebulizer treatment, and as one board member, I'm asking for that to be looked into again.
Through the chair, we have definitely looked into that. Ms. Dampier and her team were going to speak with all of the students who do get nebulizer treatments and see if there was some sort of a contingency plan we could have so they would not have to do the treatments within the room. Because what happens is, in the room, if you have a nebulizer treatment, the person issuing administering the treatment has got to be in full PPE. Then, once it's completed, everything has to be cleaned down. So obviously, this couldn't be a room where you had a lot of items in there because it had to be clean. Another thing is, if we do have to have a nebulizer room on a campus, it needs to be, if possible, outside of the main HVAC system. So it could be in a standalone. A portable would be a good place to have it if you had to have it. Outside is definitely an option. However, we do live in Florida. Tropical climate, I'm assuming that a student that is going through a nebulizer treatment needs to be in a controlled atmosphere. So the contingency plans that we can work out with those parents for these students is critical. And Ms. Dampier, if you could add to that.
Mrs. Burney has contacted every one of the parents that are on that list and had conversations with parents that are on that list. But there are still some parents who still want their kids to come to school and get that, get the treatment done at the school. So I know she's had numerous, even with the ones that have asthma, just to talk to them about the precautions that need to take place.
Well, I mean, I'll just say thank you for that. I'm a parent of 4 children, and while I respect that parent's choice to want to administer that treatment on the school campus, I'm concerned about it, and I'm asking and advocating for the other students on the campus because, again, nebulizers aerosolize secretions. It is the height of what you shouldn't do in this case, and it happening on a school campus to me is just unfathomable, honestly. That is my position on it. I am not comfortable with it, and I think we open ourselves up to a number of different issues by using it. So I think I've made myself very clear on that point. That's all my questions for Mr. Bass. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Dr. Schiff, no questions for Mr. Bass? Can't hear you. Okay. I do have questions.
There's a lag.
Oh, sorry.
My unmuting. My questions are more general, so I don't know that they're specific to Mr. Bass or the rest of the team, so I'm not sure how you want to do that because mine aren't particularly lined up by person.
Okay, we'll save the general questions for Dr. Moore at the end. Okay.
Mrs. Sork, since we're going through each person and each board member, would it be possible, Mrs. Berenborg started last time, that we rotate through in that way rather than typing comment for each person? Or
That's fine. That's great. Mr. Bass, a lot of my questions did get answered, but I do have, let me ask you about lunch, grab-and-go meals. Well, does this mean these will only be cold, or will we have hot meals that we're able to have for grab-and-go? Because as we know, we have a lot of our students who this is the only really nutritious meal that they get, and it concerns me if it's only a sandwich or something like that.
Through the chair, they will have the opportunity to serve hot items in that. The big difference in what we see in the summertime versus what they'll be able to do in the cafeteria for grab and go is you have a window of time that you have to keep that food at a certain temperature. With having the heating, the warmers there in the cafeteria, they can have those hot items and then put them out on the line. The student get it, and it still be within that window of time. So they will be able to have some warm items in that.
All right, well, that is good to know. I appreciate that. We talked about the district response team. Okay, so we have on that, we have Mrs. Holford, Mr. Seymour, and who else is on that team?
Myself.
Yourself. And then at the school base, it will be the principal, or who will be on the school base?
Principal, assistant principal, school counselor, the health assistant would probably be on there, and then any other additional leadership team members that they would like to have on there.
Okay, all right. When you were talking about tracking of students, and then we're giving that information over to the health department, correct? When we have a case.
Yes, ma'am.
My question is, do we have personal identifiable information that we're actually given over to the health department of who that individual is? Or is that just, we have a fifth grader at, one of the schools and that's the information?
That would be the information.
Okay, good.
How do they
But-
do contact tracing like that?
But if it's somebody that they have, that they're providing to us, it has been the name and date of birth.
Okay, because I would not want us to take our information. I know that we have a collaborative relationship and we're trying to grow this database, but I would not want us at all take our personal identifiable information and give it to the health department at all. Okay.
And Ms. DeAgresta, the act that was passed, I believe, 2 years ago, where you have the sharing of information between mental health agencies and so forth, this would not pertain to that, would it?
Mrs. Ork, may I? And you're right, Mr. Bass. That particular legislation had strictly to do with mental health as opposed to communicable diseases. The information that the health department would have a right to receive from us is if we do have a report of a communicable disease that we need to share basic information about the individual. So these are two different legislative provisions.
Okay,
I have a question about that, though. May I ask a question?
follow up, go ahead.
I just have a follow-up question. So if we know that we have a case, if there's a student that's identified as being COVID positive, and the contact tracing that would need to happen at that point, we're solely responsible for? Because if they don't know who the person is and they don't, how do they do that? I mean, are they not doing contact tracing anymore?
They are doing through the chair, they are doing contact tracing, but we want to be so on top of this that we can work it through, and then as we notify them that we have a positive case, they may or may not be able to get to us at that particular time. So if we work through it and go ahead and identify where they're at, we can provide them any information that they may need with their tracing, but we've gone ahead and done it with ourselves. And again, not to disparage the health department at all, but I feel that our people will be able to do that tracing a lot more efficiently than if we bring an agency in to do it.
And through the chair, it is collecting the information that the health department will need and quickly moving through that process. So we know the questions they're going to ask as we do contact tracing based on previous experiences. So having that information readily available to go through that protocol with them will accelerate the conclusion as it relates to social distancing or quarantining. So as we collect that information, it wouldn't be, well, we got Tom, Billy, John, and Susie sitting next to, the health department would say, how many students without a mask on, 15 minutes apart, broke social, we go back and say, in these particular rooms, social distancing wasn't adhered to, and then we could, it facilitates the process in a much quicker way versus having to go back and go, get information, ask questions. It'll help us to move quicker.
Okay. So, and I'm hearing all this, and I appreciate your answer, and I know that I know that you have good intentions here, so I'm not, but I don't want to get 2 months into this and, well, we did have to release that personal information. I do not support that at all without having the release from the parents. So
Yes,
I just
ma'am.
want to put that on record. And then, who talked about quarantine? Was that?
I did.
Okay. So when the health department was here, they did talk about the 14-day recommended quarantine if you're exposed. What have we come up with? Are we going to follow the 14 days, or do we have a different schedule?
You want to take it? You want me to take it? Go ahead. Okay, so we going with the CDC guidelines, and what we worked through is the first day of symptoms, the clock starts running, and 10 days after that. Now, in our plan, we put up to 14 days because we wanted to buy a little more time in case we couldn't quite identify when the symptoms began. But as far as the quarantine, that is what we will work with unless there are extenuating circumstances and we identify that, yes, they actually was prior to that and they're already working through those days.
Okay, so it's up to 14 days.
Up to 14 days, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And one last question, and then we'll move on to Mr. Meyer. This little document that we were given on the school plan, is this what is actually going to be released into the school for the parents and the students? Is it this document here that we're giving out, or is this just for us? And
Through the chair, this is a 34-page book. So this is not necessarily the information that we would give to parents. Will it be readily available after being approved on our website? Absolutely, but we'll pull information from there to give to principals to disseminate based on this information. So this is a guidance document to be used, very similar to any opening of schools minus COVID or new initiative. Principals very used to receiving documents like this throughout their career.
okay, normally I don't get into the weeds of this. I just have one recommendation as I'm looking through here. We know that our social distancing rules are while you're in the hallway as a student, you have to wear your mask. And I looked through these pictures, and these are, they don't represent what the plan is. And so I asked that we look through this because it doesn't match the information that we're trying to exhibit through the plan. So,
Yes, ma'am, we'll get that
it's a great
corrected.
plan, though.
Mrs. Zork, can I respond to something that was brought up by Mrs. Justice earlier?
Yes.
The nebulizer treatments. I do understand her concern about that because I have seen nebulizing treatments done. I'm also a parent of a child that had asthma. And I will tell you, it's extremely important to have a nebulizing treatment on campus some days.
My son also takes nebulizing treatments, I'm aware.
Sometimes it can be life-threatening. So I think it's a parent's decision, and we need to work with them, but maybe we can find an area that, because of the HVAC system, that we can kind of work on that. But I did want to make a point that I don't in any way want to say that students should have nebulizing treatments on campus. Okay, thank you.
All right, so we're going to begin with you, Mrs. Berenborg. We are moving on to Mr.
Can we take turns going first, Mrs. Zork? That would make sense.
Well, except for usually I speak last a lot.
No, let's just stay in
That's
our
okay.
order.
Let's take turns. Go ahead.
No, let's just, so Mrs. Berenborg, if you have questions for Mr. Meyer,
Yeah, I only have a couple for Mr. Meyer.
go ahead.
First of all, thank you for addressing my question I had previously about the online instruction. In case, I have had teachers contact me that said, you know, I have never taught online before, and then I was thrust into it, and I felt like I wasn't prepared, and now I'm worried that I'm going to have to do it again, and I don't feel like we're getting the preparation right now for that. I do understand about starting school, and I understand about all the new things that teachers have to learn in the PD. And like we talked about, you know, there's a big learning curve for teachers. Some teachers need to learn everything, and some teachers have got it, and they just need to know the new stuff. So you did talk about the fact that we are going to have that in place, but my question is, why wait? So let's not wait until we have to do it. And I understand right now is not a good time because we're trying to open school and we're trying to figure out all these other problems. But I would like to encourage you to really put that out there, maybe even just videos that they can click on if they're ready for it, that sort of thing. I just feel like giving them more preparation to teach online, it's a different animal to teach online than it is to teach in the classroom. And I want to support our teachers that don't feel comfortable with that without the training they need?
So, through the chair, all of the trainings that we have, they're open for each of these teachers to participate. We're just prioritizing, ensuring that those that have to begin the year, we are definitely making sure they're in there. And we will continue to offer them. And so I agree with you. We haven't put it out mandatory that every teacher has to take the Edgenuity training that's in secondary. And because right now we wouldn't want them to do that if they're not using it when they need to get the mandatory trainings that they have. But I would agree, once we ensure that each teacher has the training they need to begin the year, then we move to the next training, and we keep track of who has had everything that they need, so.
Yeah, I would love to see online catalog of trainings, but again, that's a lot of work up
Oh, you're a
front.
teacher.
Yeah, well, you talked about a force multiplier. Could you elaborate a little bit about the force multiplier?
That's just, that's Army jargon,
Uh-huh.
that when you do something, it's, you become even better. It's like synergy, right? The sum of the parts are greater than the parts themselves. So I consider coaching to be that. When you train one coach, then the coach can go and provide that training to 10 other teachers. So by organizing ourselves in a way that we can get into more places and deliver information, it's enabling us to be more impactful.
Thank
So,
you for that clarification.
Yep.
Master schedules. I know that's a moving target, and I know from creating master schedules how hard it is to do it on a normal year. I can't imagine what it's been like this year. And I have been contacted by teachers that have been frustrated because the master schedules has changed so much. They have really got to understand that. I guess their question is, at what point are we going to cut it off? We said we were going to cut it off for parents that have to make a decision, and then that moved again, and now master schedules have changed again. And I guess that goes along with the question of, at what point can a parent decide to move their child back in? Because the question was, that a teacher had for me was, will I expect a child like the next day if the parent says, okay, I'm ready to send them back to brick and mortar? Will I get them the next day, or will I get them the next week, or will I get them 6 weeks later?
So through the chair, schedules will be released today, so in our call with principals, we'll be locked and loaded to go tomorrow. So they'll have a full week and a half to plan with the actual students that they have. I think all teachers already know what they're teaching. It's just simple. What we were doing today and yesterday was the balancing, really looking at class size. So keeping in mind, we're just not at a school site class average. We're digging into what social distancing looks like per class. And if there are opportunities to say, great, we're at class size, but can we be smaller? So that was part of the cleanup work and just being critical of the environments in which we're exposing to kids. So that information will be locked in. Then we'll be ready to open the school years. One of the things that we said in our Facebook Live, if someone wanted to move between now and the opening of schools from a brick and mortar into a virtual experience, we would request that they move into the platform-driven option 2 model, because that is not a class size requirement, whereas everything else is built upon class size. So moving back in, what we'll begin to communicate, if you want to switch at this particular point, we need to open schools, and then we will obviously honor any request that's being made. But once we get folks in, locked and loaded, we'll be able to make those arrangements or shifts. But we will do our best to hold through to the 9-week requirement for transitional. So transitional going in, it was a upfront commitment for that particular 9 weeks. If we start to have students to trickle back into the environment, then we're going to create situations where we're breaking social distancing by increasing class size. So the design upfront was, this is a 9-week model. Will there be variants or case-by-case scenarios in which a student isn't being successful with those environments? We want them back in the brick and mortar. Absolutely. Will there be other scenarios at home in which the parents says, I need for you to really, really help me get into this, but we'll upfront try to hold through to the way in which it was delivered to the community to ensure, as we transition back to everyone being in brick and mortar at some point, we're still upholding the instructional fidelity of each of the models to provide quality instruction while at the same time maximizing social distancing.
Thank you. And the next question, I only have 2 more. Alignment of the 3 plans to reduce loss of instruction. Thank you. I know how hard it is just when a student moves from one school to another. And I was learning long division yesterday, and now I'm doing multiplication, today. So I know how hard that is. So I can't imagine how hard it would be to move from online and then going back into brick and mortar. So I appreciate the alignment of that. But the Unity Week that you mentioned,
Sam.
I wrote it under him too.
Okay, well, you have the
Okay.
floor.
You're going to give us more explanation as to Unity Week then? Okay.
I think Pam could do it now if you want to. I mean, it was a collaboration, but they definitely took the lead, so I think she deserves the.
We have 10 days of activities that have themes that the goal was to, transition our students back into classrooms. They've been out for a whole 9 weeks. So we wanted to have some activities dealing with social and emotional learning where they could connect, some team building activities, so they can build those relationships, so they can get back into the groove of school again. Also, that's why we put additional resources on there, because there may be times throughout the day now that we're going full day that they may want to take a brain break and do some additional, depending on the needs of those students in the classroom, some additional activities. And so district-wide, we will have themes, and I can share some of those themes with you. I mean,
That's okay. I just wanted a little bit clearer message. Because
Now,
I've heard
the
about these
collaboration
different
with the Learning Alliance, they have a section of that as well, where their coaches are providing some support as well. We, from our standpoint from Student Services, it's more about counselors assisting our teachers, but it's more teacher-led in the classroom that we are providing for the schools. So you'll be able to talk, if you're a parent, okay, the theme is get to know. You'll be able to talk with, at the middle school level, there will be activities for middle school. There will be activities for the elementary level. So at the dinner table that night, you will know that for this particular day one, the theme was get to know. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to post that. We just saw an example of it, to get to know activities. So you can talk about, hey, what did you learn today with get to know? They can share some of those activities of what they did for that particular day. But it's to connect. It's dealing with the social and emotional learning, those types of activities. We want the kids to get back into the, tradition of school. They've been out for quite a bit, and to share some of those experiences. Some of those may be thought-provoking questions that they can share and, build community within the classroom. So,
kind of like that morning meeting.
yes.
Thank you.
All right. Mrs. Rosario, questions for Mr. Meyer?
No, not for Mr. Meyer, thank you.
Okay. Mrs. Justice.
Thank you very much. Mr. Meyer, you mentioned the 15 days and how beneficial you feel that's been to planning and for teachers. Has there been any discussion in that, and I guess this is a question for Dr. Moore too, if we're seeing the benefit of additional time with our teachers preparing for students to return, has there been any discussion about that being something that we continue on in the future?
Through the chair, it's a great question. You take into consideration we are losing instructional time for this planning, and that's one of the big things about teaching and learning is being prepared to teach. So I think it's a great question for us to look next year at our calendar and balance the number of instructional planning days and actual instruction days to maximize teaching and learning. I think that's a great conversation for us to pursue next year to create a different calendar than what we've ever seen. Clearly, this year is unique. Next year should be an improvement on what we did this year, but I do appreciate that. And that's, going back to the question about master schedules, keep in mind that the schedules will be finalized tomorrow for the most part. There may be some changes here and there, and I think people need to be reflective in that. That's only to support other teachers' requests for things and other families, and we're in this together. But if everything's locked down this week, which we fully believe it's going to be, that's still before the real last week before school, right? Like next week would be our 5 days of pre-planning. So to technically have everything done the week before the teachers come back is what you always shoot for. And the fact that everyone was able to redesign this in just a couple of days last week as we began this process, it was truly phenomenal to me. So I agree. We have 196 calendar days with the teachers, and districts that are most successful balance those days of instruction and planning. So it's something to consider moving
Wonderful.
forward.
Thank you very much for that. If the additional planning days help with the quality of the instruction and make it more meaningful, then it certainly seems to be something that we should look into. Two questions regarding students. I am, in our family, we're big on making lemonade out of lemons, and one of the lemonade moments, if you will, is block scheduling in our middle schools and high schools. Can you talk a little bit, I've had some parents have questions about that. Can you talk a little bit about that change and what that'll mean for our students?
Sure, and through the chair, the block scheduling was something that we were already looking into for middle school and high school, just because, as you all know and you hear, getting teenage kids to transition and get back on task, sometimes they enjoy the social aspects of school, as well they should. But once you get them into a period and get them settled, if they've got to get set up with their laptop or their materials, the fewer of those transitions that you can do, the more learning time you have in a day. So there is a theory of action behind the block scheduling and how it will maximize student learning. So it's something that we were considering before COVID came along, but once the CDC recommendations came out as far as reducing the number of cohorts of kids that you would see, it was a no-brainer to go to that at the secondary level given the scheduling. So instead of, let's say, a student going to the 7 periods of day every day during the week, they'll do 2 or 3 longer periods and then 1 period that's, you know, the traditional 50 minutes a day. So they would have the double block every other day. And then 1 period that's the shorter period every day. And you know, there is definitely some strategy as far as which courses that you should do in the mornings, which courses you should do in the afternoons, which ones should be blocked, which ones should not. And I think that we will continue to learn lessons about that. There's definitely PD that we've been delivering from CNI, because it does take a different type of planning for teachers to be prepared to, you know, have one group of students in there for 100 minutes instead of 50. The number of activities, the number of groups, the number of standards that you cover, all these things need to be taken into consideration. But I've found success with it other places. I personally experienced it as a high school student. And I think that our students are going to enjoy it. They're going to really be able to dig in to their subjects and get a lot deeper as they get used to doing that content for 100 minutes. So a welcome change, I think.
Another question regarding students in our elementary schools. I welcomed a call from both of my children's teachers, and one of the teachers, the homeroom teacher, said your son will also have an additional teacher. So just a question about movement for elementary students on campus. If they have 2 different teachers, will they be moving or will their teachers be moving?
In every instance that we have the ability to, it's the teachers that move, not the students. I don't want to misspeak and say there won't possibly be instances where they don't do that across the districts. I don't have the entire master's schedule memorized yet. I will. Yeah. But I think for the most part, they're all, what? I mean, give me a break.
There's a quiz later.
Yeah, it's the absolute intent is to have the instructors move, not the kids.
Thank you very much.
And that's, once again, that's another bringing in some innovation into the district as far as departmentalizing there at the upper elementary grades. You know, the content gets more rigorous. The planning necessary to deliver excellent instruction becomes more difficult for a teacher to teach all subjects. So there was some intent to departmentalize, and kudos to the teachers that even during COVID, we're maintaining that push. So I'm very excited to see where that's going to go.
Thank you. That's all of my questions for Mr. Mon.
Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, I may be back to either Mr. Bass or I could wait for Dr. Moore, but Go ahead. It occurs to me, you know, there are certain things where we are mandatory reporters in cases of child abuse or neglect or anything like that. Is there any structure here where there's any requirement that either a parent report to the district if a child tests positive, or that a teacher report to the district, or that we report to the health department? And what happens if that structure breaks down? What if somebody doesn't report? What if somebody doesn't comply? What if somebody sends a child back sooner than the 10 days or the 14 days, or a teacher comes back sooner? Like, how are we managing all of the moving parts, and what parts of it are actually mandated by whom and with what enforcement?
Through the chair. All right, so several items there. let's take if we talk about the staff and staff coming back, we will be able to track that and monitor that fairly easily, particularly if they filed for any FMLA leave. As far as the students, we had indicated in our guidance that it would be 10 days once they had the first symptom, whether they tested positive or quarantined. We could ask for up to 14 depending on the given situation. As far as requirement for someone to report to us, and I don't know, yes, Dr. Suit is still in here. I don't believe there's any requirement for a student to report to us or their parents to report to us that they are positive. And she's shaking her head, and I'm correct. So, you know, with that being said, and then you take the HIPAA laws into it, that is one of the things that makes this situation so difficult is, you know, people want their privacy. They don't want that out there to know that who's positive and who's not. And it's kind of almost like the honor system. So, you know, I think under Dr. Moore's leadership and putting the wellness checks in place, that gives us another extra added level to try to keep individuals on campus safe. Because if we have those individuals who have volunteered to do those wellness checks and they are monitoring those students, and if they are showing the symptoms, they then can reach out and get them in an isolation room till we can do further investigation.
Yeah, I understand your answer, but all of it makes me a little nervous. Because as well as we plan, and I think these plans are exceptional. I think, as Dr. Moore and others have said, I think we are far out ahead in front of other districts. I think we have thought through innumerable possible scenarios for what could happen. And as a student of public policy and public administration and bureaucracy, I know that for all our good planning, there will be things that we didn't think of or that will fall through the cracks. It's just the nature of the game at this point, unfortunately. So I hear your answer. I don't know that I'm satisfied with it, but I don't know that there is an answer with which I would be satisfied or if there's another thing we can do. I'm just nervous about it because there are so many, it's not, you know, parents will need to get back to work. Kids need to get back to school. There are so many different pieces that could cause people to operate in any number of different ways. And I had asked this question earlier about masks when the health department presented and what is our capacity and our responsibility to mandate mask wearing, for example, which is also going to be complicated. So I'm just nervous about these things. And as I know, is everybody, it's not just me.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Schiff. I do have a question I think it would be appropriate for you. I've spoken with multiple parents, and they love the options that we've presented. And there are several parents I've spoke to that are choosing option 3, the transitional distance learning. Most of the parents I have spoke with are elementary, but one of their concerns many concerns are, when the student after the 9 weeks, and let's hope that after 9 weeks we can try to get our students back into the classroom because of the numbers are down. One concern that the parents have is that after the 9 weeks where they've built these relationships with these online students that they're distance learning with through the Bell schedules, what type of measures are we going to do to put in place so that when they do come back after that 9 weeks that they can be with that same cohort with the same group of kids?
Through the chair, that's
question, I know.
Yeah, that is going to be difficult in many instances, just to be frank.
Okay.
You know, we can certainly do things at the school level to welcome them back. You know, for their new teacher and the principals, you know, to make sure that they feel comfortable. But one of the challenges that we had in order to present these options are that in some cases, students are combined across schools. Just because of the nature of the beast is that, let's say at school A, only 5 kids in a grade level signed up for that course. And so we're not funded in a way that we can have one teacher for 5 kids. So we would need to find other schools, schools B and C, in order to build a full class size in order to do that. So while in some cases they will have friends, certainly, they will see some of their friends, they will not see all of their friends when they return. So just, hopefully it's their best friends. But there will be some schedule changes there where, you know, they will not be in a class any longer with certain students.
And
when
through
they
the chair,
transition
it
back.
will, and I've said this from the beginning, we would do our best to match. And every teacher that has students, some of those students will come back to her if we have that clean break. And some will become trickling back over time, and others will have at the end of 9 weeks, it would be a reentry plan. So very similar presentation to this board as to how we're going to do the forward thinking to reintroduce, you know, there are, you know, 17, 20, just over 18% just in option 3. So that's significant in terms of the number of kids if everything worked the way that it's supposed to, which doesn't really happen. But let's say it did, and then that option would be eliminated because of where we are with COVID. We would have to be very strategic at all levels, just not elementary school, on how we're going to reintroduce those students back into our population. So it's going to require some forward thinking and planning to ensure that as we greet students back into new environments, that we're opening schools just, you know, later in the school year and reintroducing some students back in. And keep in mind, some students will be returning, although they've been taught some of the social anxiety will rear its ugly head for those students significantly later in the year, where the students who are returning brick and mortar will have the opportunity to be exposed to that earlier on. So it is us knowing and learning through the initial implementation and circling back to say, how do we help these students transition back in? The good news is we'll have these kids, and we'll know the environment of where we are with COVID and begin to transition them back through activities, exposures, matching to who will be their new teacher if they have a new teacher, and really begin to develop those relationships over a few weeks versus, guess what, it's Monday and you're going back to school.
Sounds like we're going to have a multiple different phase-in openings of welcoming students back to school after the next we finish the 9 weeks. We'll have to have another welcome back and introduction, because it's going to be all new for all these students that come back.
Sure, and potentially also at the semester break for those that are doing the semester-long commitment. But what I would also sort of remind, although they've built relationships with their remote class, they're returning to the school that they ended the year in, and my guess is, I think that for our younger learners, our kindergartners, they may not remember everybody's names, but the 4th, 5th graders, they'll come back to classes for kids they've been in school with for a couple of years. So they would have friends when they return back to the brick and mortar class, whenever that was.
Well, but let's be realistic about this. When you're that young and you have a group of kids that have already had 9 weeks together, and they have their little group that they're friends with, and you're a child coming in, you're basically, you're not a part of a group yet sometimes. And so I see the importance and concern of some of the parents here. So I appreciate you paying attention to it. I think Mr. Fagan's next. So Mrs. Berenborg, do you have any questions for Mr. Fagan?
I don't have any questions. Just a statement. I appreciate your can-do attitude, and I will challenge you about those parking lot meetings. I have seen some, and the reason why I've seen them is because, first of all, y'all don't stop until it's dark out.
I know.
And they're all making sure that they're getting home safe, so I just appreciate your attitude. Thank you.
Mrs. Rosario, Mr. Fagan, questions?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Fagan, I talked with Dr. Moore about the previous revision of the plan, not this revision, but the previous plan that was written up. There were 3 different places where logs and reports were indicated. Each one was different in its context, but really they were just asking the same thing. Like one was the health room aide or the nurse is supposed to keep a log of which students show up who have symptoms. And then another log would be the actual report that goes to the Department of Health. And then there was a third log somewhere. And now in this new revision, I'm going to try to get it up. In the new revision, I believe it's on page 16. I'm not sure. There was a different name for it, which was pretty long, and right now I can't find it. So just to save time on that, with the forms and the logs and with everything else now being in focus, even the student seating charts, have we kind of taken a look at all of these different forms? What I shared with Dr. Moore yesterday, and I see Dr. Moore's pulling his mic closer because he's ready to talk, is in the logs that we create, my hope is that we can have a uniform report for all schools, and each school can add to it, but I certainly don't want schools to take away from the very basic: who reports, what are their symptoms, what time, what classroom did they come from, did they get sent back to class, did they get sent home, that sort of thing. And of course, follow up, because that's so critical with the contact tracing. Not that I'm suggesting that we make this public, but for purposes of, establishing Dr. Schiff's concern with, I hope we don't miss anybody. I hope we don't make a mistake and inadvertently, I'm not saying that we would do it on purpose, but inadvertently, with all that's going on in schools coming in and out, kids have sniffles all the time. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to be a symptom of COVID. And so these are the kinds of things that I was wondering with these forms. Rather than having 3 or 4 different forms or reports, I'd like to see if we can narrow them down and kind of use them for multiple purposes. So it seemed to fall under your directive, Mr. Fagan, but I see Dr. Moore is eager to.
Through the chair, it's actually Ms. Dampier, but I will set it up, and if I leave anything off, she can add. So as we followed up yesterday, the communicable disease log is actually a Department of Health form that is communicated directly to them, that we house or are required to house and communicate with them. So that is in fact a separate form. The other forms that we're looking in terms of the frequency within our health departments, that is a form that we have kept for a number of years. Typically, we have kept in a paper version stored and housed at the particular schools. So we do need to problem solve to say, can it be housed in a confidential location, whether it be focus, to pull the information together. And I think that would just be one additional step that we could take as a system to really monitor who's using the health professionals that we provide at our schools. Are there things that we're seeing in our schools to kind of monitor practice? So that will be one of the things that Ms. Dampier will begin to look at and work with Mr. McDonald in terms of doing that work.
Okay.
Okay. I do have another follow-up.
Okay.
But I don't know if we're still going by person, or can I ask Dr. Moore?
We're not to Dr. Moore yet, but we'll get there. Is that it for Mr. Fagan?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Mrs. Justice.
Thank you very much. Not a lot of things to say. You sound like you've spent a lot of money lately. So, and I think it's all in an effort to keep our families and our kids and our teachers safe. So thank you for making sure that the funds are accessible to do that job. I appreciate it. I just want to highlight 2 people that you spoke of a little bit when you were talking, and that's Dr. McMahon and Mr. McDonald. Two people that have given years to this district, are very, very committed to students, and although not sitting at this table, without their work, you could not accomplish, I'm sure, what you are trying to accomplish. So I just wanted to give them a little shout out, because I've always been impressed by the people that work in this district, but I think it's wonderful to see everyone really shining. So thank you.
Dr. Schiff?
Yeah, just big kudos and props. And this is, I thought of it during when Mr. Fagan was speaking, but true for everybody. All of you, I noticed, were reading off lists of what had been done. Can we get copies of those, please? Particularly, Mr. Fagan, I was between the 67,000 cloth masks and the 18,000 hand sanitizers. I would just like to have that documentation would be helpful. And I, for me as well as other, and obviously all board members if they're interested. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Mr. Fagan, for these items that you did read off the list, like the mask and things like that, that's, are we going to be able to apply for a grant for all that through the funding on that?
Through the chair, yes, ma'am. Some of it's already in the CARES grant,
Okay.
and we're always looking for other grants.
So do you see any of the needs that we have or the items that we're paying for that's not going to be covered by the grants, and then it's going to be our responsibility to find it somewhere else?
Yes, ma'am. Through the chair, some of this stuff we will have to absorb within the general budget.
Okay. When we get to that point, when what we're absorbing, can you let us know? Because that's part of our job, is to be able to lobby on behalf of the school district in the area that we feel that we still need more funding for. So if you could keep us up to date on that, I appreciate it.
Through the chair, yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Next we have Mrs. Dampier, Mrs. Barrenborg.
Just two comments and a question. Thank you for really considering the mental health aspect of this. I think it's important that we start the year with wellness for not just students, but for our staff. And so I appreciate that, because a lot of times it's an afterthought, and I think that needs to be a forethought on this. So thank you for that. The other comment I made was about the ESE Parent Council feedback and the virtual learning videos for ESE. Thank you for starting to really hone in on the needs of our ESE population and their parents as well. I know in the past that we haven't been as able to communicate and get feedback. So I appreciate the fact that we're actually getting that feedback and then doing something about it. So I appreciate that. And I hope that continues. Good. And then the SRO training, 6 hours of training.
That is a state-required training that our teachers have gone through over the past 2 years as well. So we're encouraging our SRO officers so they can be, they know these strategies as well. So we're, it is a required training with the 6 hours.
Okay, are we putting, maybe working with the Sheriff's Department to do some more specific training for education, for working with our administrators, for those type of trainings for our SROs?
So through the chair, last Monday, Mr. Bass and myself had the opportunity to meet with all SROs and begin that initial training. My part of the presentation was the introduction of a new code of conduct, a new way of work by the school system as a whole, really to empower students with the appropriate behaviors to keep them in school. So we kicked that off last week. Ms. Dampier and her team will follow up as we move throughout the year. One of the things that I told our SROs, both the sheriff as well as Vero Beach Police Department, is we really do have a good relationship. And coming from a system that had its own police department, the willingness for them to come in and participate in this training, Milo Thornton has been absolutely outstanding in ensuring that we're speaking in one voice and working with Mr. Bass, myself, and Ms. Dampier to set these trainings up in order to ensure that we are using a school resource policing program to benefit children.
So we're going to work hand in hand then with more training on trying to decrease the number of arrests and do some other strategies and put in place where we work a little bit more with the student and the family.
Through the chair, I think I explicitly defined my expectation on how we interact with the children of this county while they're in our schools.
Thank you.
Mrs. Rosario? No?
Yes, ma'am. I noticed that in the changes that were sent to us yesterday, there were one of the changes on page 13, I believe it is, was a move from wellness screening to symptom screening. I hope I didn't reverse that. Well, because I'm just looking at my notes now. Wellness screening to symptom screening. If we're changing that in the plan from wellness to symptom, I think that we needed to change it. Is it going to change everywhere, or was it just for that one particular area?
Through the chair, as we looked at the document, that was just a better way of capturing that particular information. It is more than just a symptom screening upon entry, so it is a wellness screening, so it's just a little bit more comprehensive in nature.
Okay, because one of the things that I find is very important for symptom screening, I recommended this when the last Dr. Moore, you and I talked, was to add for symptom screening a bullet that indicates, have you had a fever within the past 24 hours? That is different from what's in there now, which is, do you have a fever of 100.4? That's different. So they walk in, do you have a fever now? Is different from they walk in, they don't have a fever now, but they may have had one within the last 24 hours. Pretty regular, pretty standard when a child is sick and they go to the doctor typically says, for any cold or fever or flu, you can return back to work or back to school so long as you don't have a fever after 24 hours. So I don't see that added in there as one of the possible symptom checks.
Through the chair, I thought we added that, but that, to me, I don't have any issues with that. Have you had a fever in the last 24 hours?
He said he's going to add it.
Okay, and then, let me see. There was something else that is a concern for me, and that is students, let me see if I can go there. It's in a few different places, but most prominently on the page that indicates students and staff may return to campus when. And one of the bullets that's there, when symptoms have improved. I have real serious concerns about the word improved. I would like they have no symptoms to return, because we are not mandating people to get a negative. Well, there's two scenarios. There's one where someone has symptoms alone. If they have symptoms when they leave school, I would prefer that they have no symptoms when they come back to school. I don't want to get anybody else sick. I don't want any possibility for an outbreak. So I would just prefer that it says no symptoms at all. And then the second scenario is if someone is tested positive, and in that scenario, we definitely want a negative test or no symptoms to come back to ensure everybody's, peace of mind that we are doing everything that we can. So can we change that wording there?
Through the chair, so we problem solved late yesterday after our meeting, both with our attorney, as well as contacting the health department, and the recommendation from the health department is that we follow the CDC guidelines. That's the information that's captured in here, with the caveat that there may be additional information forthcoming in the next couple of days, which is just standard operation for this scenario, as well as the burden that we would place on students and the assumption of cost if we required a student to, if we require it very similar to a service provided within IEP, then we would be required for funding that. I don't know if Mr. Gressler, did I capture that correctly?
Mrs. Swart, may I? Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Moore. Yes, essentially, if we are requiring something of our exceptional student population outside what's already within their IEP, then we would be responsible for attempting to coordinate that with them. So there's that aspect of it. But also the information that I shared yesterday was being sure that we are maintaining close contact with our health department officials and following as closely as possible the CDC recommendations that are coming to us through our health department.
Through the
Yes.
chair, we are 100% aligned with them, and I think the systems that we will have to work with students when there is a positive case or even continued absences in terms of why a student may be absent, I feel comfortable that we'll be able to provide environments that are as safe as possible.
Okay, I think we're not on the same page here. I don't know if we're talking the same language. What I'm suggesting is that we do not allow anybody to return if they still have symptoms.
Oh, through the chair, if you have symptoms, then that would be the requirement to stay home.
Okay, but we have it written in our plan that they still have symptoms, they can still come back. So let me show you. Let's go to the back of the book, and it's in a few other places as well. Oh my gosh. Sorry.
Okay, they're looking for that now, Mrs. Rosario. We're actually on with Mrs. Dampier, but we're getting off topic here, or off our
Okay,
rotation.
Page 22. If you go to page 22, one of the bullets there says symptoms have improved. Students who have experienced a mild to moderate case of COVID-19 may return to campus when symptoms have improved.
May I say something? May I just interject? There are symptoms of COVID-19 that continue on past the level of contagiousness, and that's something, there are some long-term things that continue, so just, it becomes a little tricky. Just wanted to make a note of that.
Well, that's exactly my point. And people can still carry the disease even if they still have slight symptoms. So I would just prefer that that bullet and any place else that refers to that say they do not have the symptoms. They do not have their symptom free.
Through the chair, in our conversation yesterday with the health department, and we problem solved that same exact conversation that we're talking through now. That was not the recommendation. What is in front of you now is the exact recommendation from the health department.
So the health department is suggesting that if somebody has symptoms, we send them home for 14 days. But if they still have the same symptoms, we can let them come back to school. Is that what the health department said?
Through the chair, no, that's not at all what the health department says. When the symptoms are less or reducing at the end of that time, it has been 10 days since the symptoms first appeared, and they have been fever-free for 24 hours without using fever reduction medication, and symptoms, i.e. cough, shortness of breath, have improved. So it's not saying have a symptom, stay home for 10 days, continue with symptoms, and then return.
Okay, so what if they are but they still have symptoms, then what?
Then the student would continue to stay home, and then we would, with our medical assistants, continue to see if we can provide the appropriate level of support and service for our students. So I think that is,
So
Mrs.
this is my
Rosario?
point. If they still have symptoms, even if it's some cough or some shortness of breath, we're still allowing them back into the school building. We shouldn't. We should keep them home, stay home until you do not have cough, shortness of breath, fever, or any of that, including staff. It's just for everybody's safety.
Okay. He's making notes. We are on Mrs. Dampier. Did you have any further questions for Mrs. Dampier before we get to Dr. Moore? Okay. Mrs. Justice?
Thank you. Mrs. Dampier, when a child has an IEP that requires them to remove their face covering when they're in contact with a teacher, such as speech pathology, how will we handle that? Will we be supplying that child with a face shield? I'm just curious how that interaction will work, because it'll be important for that child to see both the teacher's mouth and the student's mouth.
We'll have a face shield. We have face shields for every student as well as for every employee.
Thank you very much. Since we touched on SROs and there was some discussion, I just wanted to take this moment to mention the fact that our SROs have a very clear purpose on our campus, and that is to ensure the safety of our staff and our children. And so it has been unfortunate at times when I have visited schools in the past, because there are occasionally SROs that are helping with pass things out in the cafeteria or do different things, and there's been some feedback that sometimes they don't feel that they're utilized or respected for their role. So just that delicate balance between wanting that SRO to be a member of our school family, but also recognizing the fact that they have a very important job to do, and we need to respect that. Just wanted to make mention of that. Mrs. Maddox spoke about consistency. I know we're on you right now, so I just want to talk about some of the things that you said. The signage, and that is wonderful. Just one note about consistency, and it's about school communication in general. We've had some schools that make alterations to the dress code for their campus. Just some clarification as for each school site. Hoodies, for example, we have allowed hoodies. The school board chose to allow hoodies to be worn, but the hood is not allowed to be worn on buses or on school campuses. But we recognize the fact it was very difficult for students to find sweatshirts that didn't have hoods. As a mom, I know that is true. It is difficult to find. So just a question about that consistency through messaging about dress codes while we're...
Through the chair. It has always been the collaboration with the SAC team at the schools. We give a dress code, we provide a dress code, but then at the schools, if their SAC team votes, they can have a more stringent dress code. It can't be more lenient. It can be more no, it cannot be more lenient, but they have to have the minimum. So most of our schools have uniforms, except we have one middle school as well as the two high schools that do not have uniforms. So it has been the expectation that they must adhere to the dress code. You know, we just voted on no Confederate flags on clothing or swastika. So the expectation is that they follow the minimum dress code that is on campus. So they can't lift that.
So the reason I ask that is, in this situation, regarding the rules around COVID and mask wearing and those things, is it to be understood that the consistency is across the district, that schools aren't going to be putting in additional measures? Or just for parents' own understanding, parents often have children at different schools.
During our weekly meetings with the principals, the expectation is that we are to wear masks. We have gone over the expectations of when they are not allowed to, you know, as long as there's social distancing. But the expectation is that we're following the guidelines that are in our back to school and reopening plan.
And if there's a change that a principal, if there's a concern a principal has or a change on their campus, how are they addressing that?
They will speak to their immediate supervisor, which is Mr. Bass, and then he will bring that concern to cabinet, and then we'll problem solve from there. If they can't problem solve between the two of them. But the goal is to have consistency across all of our campuses.
Wonderful. And my last question is, the Department of Health is able to give recommendations, but they are not in the position to mandate or tell us, just some clarification on their role here.
That is correct. We've had a meeting, I think it was a week ago, and we were in this room and we had conversation with the Department of Health, and they kept saying, this is what the CDC, but you make the decision. So they give us information and then we come up with our plan. And that's why we've come up with our own reopening plan to make sure it's consistent district-wide, to have the same rules and expectations, so everyone's familiar with this, all of our stakeholders.
Yeah, and I just want to say thank you. I know that in other districts, the Department of Health and the school districts have butted heads a little bit, and that doesn't seem to be the case here, and I just want to say thank you to the Department of Health and to the school district staff for their collaboration. That is all my questions. Thank you.
Dr. Schiff, any questions for Mrs. Dampier?
Just two quick ones. You talked about all of the trainings. You went through a long list of trainings and things that had been done or were being done for this year. Can you clarify if those are new for this year, given COVID, or how many of those were already, or was there a proportion that were already in existence and you were just reminding us of those, or were all of those newly scheduled as a result of this new environment?
It's a combination of both. Our resource specialists, that training would take place anyway, but we wanted to make sure that, because we're under COVID, making sure that they knew the expectations. And some of the videos that we've created is to make sure that there's consistency amongst all of our stakeholders in our schools for implementation of what virtual school looked like. So that one is new. We ordinarily would not be doing the virtual school because that would not be in place if we didn't have COVID for option 2B. The other trainings that we have as far as Unity Week, we've been doing some support with our staff as well as our students since we've had mental health and social and emotional learning. Some of it is new, some of it is stuff that we would ordinarily be doing because we want to have a positive culture in our classroom learning environments as well as within our schools. So I can't go through all of the trainings, but when I submit my information, I can say whether or not it's new or, because otherwise I'd have to go back through the list. But the majority of the training coming from the student services side would be happening anyway. Most of the training from the ESC side would be happening anyway unless it was training dealing with teachers in new environments, for example, the virtual school, or if there was training about the procedures for the health room and isolation room, things of that nature that we ordinarily would not have maybe our principals doing, but we would have our health assistants being trained in that manner because they would be the ones giving out medication, et cetera, and be in charge of the health room. So some of these trainings are just so we have additional people who are trained because this is new to all of us to make sure we have more hands on deck with that. Also, some of the trainings that we're providing are for the wellness screening training. We ordinarily wouldn't have that because we wouldn't be in COVID. So that is new. We want to make sure that people who want to volunteer, employees that want to volunteer, will have the tools that they need to make sure that they're actually monitoring for effectiveness and making sure that we are screening appropriately. School counselors, school counselors.
You don't have to go through every single one of them because I think we're really running short on time, but that would be helpful documentation if you can provide it to us at a later date.
Mm-hmm. But I do want to say something about school counselors because at the elementary level, that's brand new, so we would not have had that training since we just implemented the elementary. We're having that at the elementary level, but we would have it normally at the secondary level, so.
Okay. Thank you. My other question is quickly for you. You mentioned the ESE parent team. I know that's the wrong word for it. Is that specifically meant only for parents of ESE kids, or is that also open to others who have an interest in ESE?
Well, in the past, it has been mostly invite only. This year, we're moving towards putting that information on our website, so anyone who wants to attend can attend for informational purposes. The goal is to have a quarterly superintendent parent advisory meeting for the year, and then to have a monthly meeting for our ESC parents or whomever want to participate in that from the ESC department. So we really want to have feedback from our, just feedback from our stakeholders as well as community members. That is an area that we really want to improve on. So we want as much feedback as we can to make sure that we get better in that particular area.
Okay, so maybe we might want to rename it something other than the Parent Advisory Council if it's not just parents. We might want to consider that. That's not, it doesn't matter at the moment. It's just a point I noticed. To the chair, Madam Chair, we're
Yes.
now running on 3.5
Yes.
hours. We haven't had a break, and I know that we have two more cabinet we have one more cabinet member to go and Dr. Moore. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are about taking a break, or it looks like we're going to be going for a while.
Dr. Schiff, we actually, we have cabinet members that have a 4:30 meeting. My recommendation is that we finish up our questions with Mrs. Maddox, and then tonight after the presentation, we ask Dr. Moore our questions that we have for him tonight.
I have a question I'd like to ask Dr. Moore in this setting.
We'll
Okay, I just
go,
wanted because more of my questions are for Dr. Moore, and I just wanted
Right.
to clarify, because I expect other board members have those as well.
right. Well, I'll go based on consensus, what individual board we want to do as a board. Do we want to save our questions for tonight for Dr. Moore? Because time is, it's 4:20, and cabinet does have a 4:30 meeting.
May I speak?
Yeah,
I'm fine with, I can't tell if you're looking at me or if you
I
would call
am, I'm
them.
looking at you.
Okay. I'm fine with leaving it till tonight. I think tonight we also tend to have a broader audience, and in the interest of letting cabinet members get where they need to go, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Seems we have one board member that has a question. We'll go ahead and kind of skip order here, but before I do that, do we have any questions for Kristen?
I have a comment for Kristen.
I just had a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd just like to say thank you for the consistency of messaging. I think that's extremely important. I do know that you've had to be very flexible because things change constantly, but I think the consistency of messaging, especially with the signs and the decals, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Rosario, Mrs. Justice?
Yes, thank you. I just want to thank you for your perspective as a parent, kind of running through the fabric of all of the communication. I think that it's so important and it's so valuable that you have children in school, because when we're communicating with parents, sometimes we are so stuck in this world that we live in that we don't always communicate to them in a way that they can hear and understand us in their busy lives. So thank you for always putting parents and children first in your communications. I appreciate it.
Okay. Dr. Schiff, questions or comments for Kristen?
Just a quick echo of thank you for all the messaging. And you happened to mention that your favorite video was the liftoff video. And I know I wrote to you directly when I saw it. I too thought that was absolutely fabulous. And so many people worked really hard to put that together from all of the schools and the district. And I want to acknowledge not only everybody who put it together, but what a terrific product that was and how inspiring it was. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you. It was a lot of fun.
Kristen, or Mrs. Maddox, thank you. The communications over the last couple of years with you being here has went beyond measure. I mean, it's just fantastic, the communications that we have now as parents, and I appreciate it, and I know it's because of your hard work and your team, so thank you. So let's, it seems we have consensus for tonight for Dr. Moore's questions, but we do have a board member that has a question or comment now. But if I could please ask the other board members, let's save our questions until tonight, and we can have a more in-depth dialogue with Dr. Moore. So go ahead.
This is something that can be brought up tonight, but I felt it was more appropriate in this workshop setting where Mr. Meyer may be able to speak to it as well. Dr. Moore, you and I have discussed before an issue that was brought up at the last meeting we had by Mr. Brown. You had shared at an equity committee meeting that we had a large percentage of African American students choosing not to return to school, to choosing option 2 or 3. A larger percentage of African American students versus our white students, and some of the concerns about that, why that was, we're seeing it across the country, and supporting, and so just a discussion about that and any supports that we're putting into place, because as we move through the African American Achievement Plan and we recognize that there have been gaps in learning for our African American students, how are we offering additional support to families or communication to families? Number one, that the transitional learning plan is different than the provisional plan as far as the pace and the grading. And I just want to make sure that we're communicating that to parents properly, and not just African American parents, but all parents. So if we could talk about that a little bit. And the other thing is, you know, the concern about African American achievement as we move forward and look at the data points for the African American Achievement Plan. Not having those children in school, we recognize the classroom is the best place for learning to happen. And how are we going to address if we see that gap widening?
So through the chair, I think one of the things that begins to answer that question is that we're probably the only district that had 98% of their families respond to the choice option, which means that didn't happen by accident. We were about 60% complete, and then asked our principals to work with their counselors, really to call families, get the information, and walk them through the selection process. So in doing that work, that was option number one, just not to make an assumption regarding the option selection being selected, but also explain the depth within each of the 3 options to ensure that we were making informed decisions. We're also being extremely intentional within each of the options of creating what good, meaningful instruction looks like. So as mentioned before, it really is having a clear pivot point to talk, shifting from getting kids in the appropriate places. That work has been done. But to really taking a deep, hard look at the quality of instruction within each of those 3 options, looking at small groups taking place in virtual spaces, following up, grading assignments, giving explicit feedback to parents. Even before then, we had a 99% of our students participating with devices prior to the close. We didn't collect any of those devices, yet we continue to give away devices moving forward. The hotspots continuing to give those away as we're informed that there is a need. So we've done a great deal of work to ensure that the technology is in the home regardless as to where that home is. It has access to Wi-Fi regardless of where that home is. Really deepening our training as it relates to teachers to ensure quality instruction is taking place. And then really monitoring student progress as the school year begins and being willing to circle back with parents and families and teachers based on student progress. And when students aren't excelling within a particular model, it is a conversation to be had about exploring different models, taking additional measures in order to ensure that we're not leaving any student behind as we move through this COVID experience.
So the follow-up to that would be, and this is a question that doesn't have anything to do with race, but with students and student achievement, when we're looking at the 2 things, the grading that happened at the end of the year last year, there were modifications made to grades to take into account the fact that COVID had happened and we really were kind of, building the airplane as you were flying it. Will that grade forgiveness or modification happen at the beginning of this year? I have had a number of parents contact me concerned about that. And then of the percentage of students that have chosen option 2 or 3 that are a level 1 or 2 student that we know have been struggling even in the classroom environment, has there been additional support or reaching out going on with those parents to explain if perhaps a teacher or a principal sees that student may have some difficulty with online learning, or if they didn't, if they had difficulty at the end of the year last year?
So through the chair, the answer to your question is yes. So principals are clearly aware that our expectation of meaningful academic outcomes has not pushed away from my initial expectation upon assuming this position. So it's clearly been communicated. As we begin to implement, principals are clearly aware of, taking the appropriate action, whether it be a social emotional reaction or a academic shift in assignment in order to monitor students. So we, just in walking schools yesterday, clearly defined systems in place, looking at academic outcomes, the themes or expectations schools have. They're still talking through the requirement of maintaining an A, looking at their school improvement plans, the subgroups that they plan to address based on previous year's data. So I feel comfortable the design is in place, the expectation is clearly in place, and we will be able to pivot when we don't see the appropriate level of academic response from students in a very, very timely manner. And I think we've done that forward training over the summer, really to prepare our principals to be true instructional leaders within each of these three environments and know we're just not the district that's wanting to implement this plan, but ultimately a district that is going to get it right within each of these three models and really make fluid, complex decisions in the best interest of children in the midst of real time.
Can you answer the grade modification question?
So I think what we did at the end of last year was compassion and grace. Standard line grading was one of the topics that we had with our principals over the summer, ensuring that we are not producing grades or for students who aren't at the level of the standard. The grade should directly reflect the child's ability within that particular standard, measuring him or her against that standard within the grade level that standard falls in, and not just their effort. So it really is looking at giving students opportunities to be exposed to these standards and then grading them based on those particular standards. That's how we push and grow teaching and learning. So it won't be an issue.
I hope it won't be.